She was nobody, invisible in a room full of power and diamonds. But when Adrian Volkov, the most dangerous man in the city, crossed the ballroom and stopped in front of her trembling frame, everything changed. One whispered proposition, one impossible choice, and suddenly, the girl everyone ignored became the fiancée everyone feared. What begins as a ruthless strategy will ignite a war that spans empires, test loyalties until they shatter, and force two people to confront a terrifying truth. Some lies become real, and some hearts are worth destroying kingdoms for. If you're ready to witness a love born from deception and forged in fire, stay until the end, and don't forget to hit like and comment your city so I can see how far Lena and Adrian's story reaches across the world. The Ashford estate glittered like a constellation fallen to earth, every window ablaze with golden light that spilled across manicured gardens and marble fountains. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows over champagne towers, and guests draped in couture worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. The wedding reception of Senator Ashford's daughter was the event of the season, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth, power, and political alliances that shaped the city's hidden architecture of influence. Lena Rivera didn't belong here. She knew it in the way eyes slid past her as though she were furniture, in the whispers that died when she approached, in the cheap fabric of her navy dress that seemed to announce her inadequacy to everyone who bothered to notice. She'd come as a favor to her roommate Sarah, whose cousin had needed an extra bridesmaid at the last minute. Sarah had promised it would be fun, an adventure into a world they'd never otherwise glimpse. Instead, Lena found herself counting minutes until she could escape. She sat at a corner table partially obscured by an elaborate floral arrangement, orchids and roses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The placement felt deliberate, a subtle segregation that kept the lesser guests out of sight from the main celebration. Around her, other plus-ones and distant relatives picked at their plates in awkward silence, all of them acutely aware they were window dressing for someone else's perfect day. "I heard she's a waitress or something," a voice drifted from the next table, not quite low enough. "Wearing a dress from a department store. How embarrassing." Lena's fingers tightened on her water glass. She didn't look up, didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing she'd heard. Years of being overlooked had taught her to make herself smaller, quieter, to disappear even when surrounded by people. It was safer that way. But safety, she was about to learn, was an illusion. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted subtly, like the pressure change before a storm. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they modulated, became more careful. Lena glanced up from her studied examination of the tablecloth to see what had caused the change. A man stood in the entrance to the ballroom. He didn't need to announce himself. His presence did it for him, a gravitational pull that made everything else in the room feel like set decoration. He was tall, perhaps 6'3", with dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble and shadow. His suit was immaculate, tailored with the kind of precision that whispered of old money and dangerous taste. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, dark, assessing, holding an intelligence that felt predatory in its intensity. Adrian Volkov. Even Lena, who avoided the society pages and gossip columns, knew that name. Everyone did. He owned half the city's real estate, held stakes in industries from shipping to pharmaceuticals, and commanded loyalty from people who made their living in shadows. Politicians feared him, businessmen courted him, and everyone, absolutely everyone, knew better than to cross him. "What is he doing here?" someone whispered nearby, the words tight with anxiety. "Senator Ashford probably invited him. You don't not invite Adrian Volkov to something like this. It would be taken as an insult. But having him here is practically an announcement that you're in his pocket. Better his pocket than his crosshairs." Lena watched as Adrian moved through the room with unhurried confidence, stopping occasionally to shake hands or exchange brief words. Men straightened their spines when he approached. Women adjusted their posture, preened and simpered in ways that made Lena's stomach turn. And through it all, his expression remained neutral, almost bored, as though this entire glittering affair was beneath his notice. Then his gaze swept across the room and landed on her. Time seemed to slow. Those dark eyes held hers for a heartbeat, 2, 3, long enough that Lena felt certain he would look away, would dismiss her as easily as everyone else had. Instead, something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, perhaps? Or calculation. He started walking toward her table. "Oh my God," Someone breathed nearby. He's coming over here. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. There had to be a mistake. He couldn't be approaching her. Men like Adrian Volkov didn't notice girls like her. Invisible, insignificant, carefully overlooked. Yet with each step he took, the certainty grew that she was exactly where his attention had fixed. The woman who'd been mocking her dress moments earlier had gone pale, her hand flying to her throat. The realization was dawning on all of them. They were about to be in Adrian Volkov's immediate orbit, and none of them knew what that meant. He stopped directly in front of Lena's chair. Up close, he was even more devastating and more dangerous. She could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the barely leashed power in his stance, the way his presence seemed to consume all the air in her immediate vicinity. Her instinct screamed at her to look away, to make herself smaller, to disappear. But something stubborn and half-forgotten sparked in her chest. She'd spent years shrinking herself for other people's comfort. Just this once, just for a moment, she refused. Lena lifted her chin and met his gaze directly. A smile ghosted across his lips, barely there, but unmistakable. Approval, she thought with shock. He approved of her defiance. "You look lost," Adrian said, his voice low and textured like smoke over gravel. The words seemed meant for her ears alone, though everyone at the surrounding tables had gone silent, straining to hear. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Lena replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "That's the problem." His smile widened fractionally. "Then perhaps you're at the wrong event entirely." Before Lena could formulate a response, he extended his hand. Not a handshake, an invitation, an expectation. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. But somehow, it also didn't feel like a command. It felt like a test. The smart thing would be to refuse, to apologize and claim she didn't dance, to protect herself from whatever game he was playing. But Lena had been smart her entire life. And where had it gotten her? Invisible. Overlooked. Sitting in corners at events where she didn't belong, tolerating casual cruelty from people who would forget her name before the night ended. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, sure. He pulled her to her feet with effortless strength, and suddenly she was standing inches from him, close enough to see the subtle variations of dark gray in his eyes, close enough to catch the scent of expensive cologne and something darker underneath. "What's your name?" Adrian asked as he led her toward the dance floor. "Lena Rivera." "Lena." He tested the name like he was tasting wine, determining its quality. "You're not on the guest list." "How do you know?" "Because I know every name on the guest list, and yours wasn't among them." The revelation should have frightened her. Instead, it sparked something reckless in her chest. "Does that bother you?" "No," Adrian said as they reached the center of the dance floor. Other couples were already dancing, but the moment Adrian pulled Lena into his arms, space seemed to clear around them. "It intrigues me." The music swelled, something classical, elegant, completely at odds with the chaos in Lena's chest. Adrian's hand settled at her waist with confident familiarity, and he led her into the first steps of a waltz with the kind of precision that suggested expensive lessons and years of practice. "You dance well," she observed, letting him guide her through a turn. "Disappointed? I assumed men like you had people to dance for you." A low laugh rumbled in his chest, and Lena felt it vibrate through her entire body. "Men like me? Powerful, dangerous, above mundane activities like dancing at weddings. Is that what people say about me?" "Among other things." "And what do you think?" Lena considered the question as they moved together with surprising synchronicity. She should lie, should offer platitudes or feign ignorance. But something about the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle worth solving rather than a person to dismiss, made her reckless with honesty. "I think you're here for a reason that has nothing to do with celebrating a wedding," Lena said quietly. "I think every move you make is calculated, and I think I'm part of whatever game you're playing, though I can't imagine why." Adrian's eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval or might have been danger, possibly both. Very perceptive. "Which means I'm right." "You tell me." He pulled her fractionally closer, close enough that propriety blurred. "What would you do if you discovered I was using you?" The question should have angered her. Instead, it felt like an invitation to honesty. "Depends on what I get in return." "Now who's calculating?" I'm a fast learner. The music swelled toward a crescendo, and Adrian spun her with controlled force that made her dress flare. When he pulled her back, his mouth was inches from her ear. How would you like to be someone important, Lena Rivera? Her breath caught. What? 1 hour from now, everyone in this room will know your name. They'll court your favor, fear your influence, wonder how you captured my attention. His voice dropped even lower, intimate and dangerous. They'll never overlook you again. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Why would you do that? Because I need a fiancé. Adrian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and what she saw there made her knees weak. Not romance. This wasn't some fairy tale proposition. This was strategy, cold and calculated and utterly serious. And you need to matter. Lena's mind reeled. You want me to pretend to be engaged to you? Yes. That's insane. Probably. A hint of amusement colored his tone. Do you care? She should. She absolutely should care about being pulled into whatever machinations drove Adrian Volkov's world. But as she stood there in his arms, feeling the weight of eyes on her back, remembering every slight and dismissal and moment of invisible insignificance, something defiant and dangerous unfurled in her chest. How long? Lena asked. 6 months. Maybe less if things progress faster than anticipated. And what do I get? Protection, wealth, access to a world you've only glimpsed from the outside. Adrian's eyes searched hers, and the satisfaction of watching everyone who's ever dismissed you scramble to earn your approval. It was manipulation, beautifully executed. He was offering her everything she'd never admitted to wanting: vindication, power, visibility. The smart thing would be to refuse, to walk away before she drowned in waters far deeper than she could navigate. But Lena was so tired of being smart and safe and invisible. What's the catch? She asked. The woman approaching us in approximately 30 seconds is my rival's daughter, Elena Petrov. She's been positioning herself as my future wife for the past year, trying to secure an alliance between our organizations. Adrian's expression remained neutral, but his voice hardened almost imperceptibly. I need her to understand that will never happen. Lena didn't turn to look, but she could feel the shift in energy behind her, someone approaching with the confidence of assumed welcome. So you want me to play the role of your surprise engagement, Lena said, publicly, right now. Yes. And Elena Petrov will be furious, humiliated, dangerous. Adrian's eyes held hers. This isn't a game, Lena. The moment you say yes, you become a target. There will be consequences. Some you can anticipate, many you can't. Then why ask me? You could have any woman here. Because any woman here would expect it to become real eventually. They'd scheme and manipulate, trying to turn pretense into permanence. His thumb brushed against her palm, a gesture so small she might have imagined it. But you're smart enough to know this is business, aren't you? The question hung between them, loaded with implications Lena was only beginning to understand. This was a contract disguised as romance, strategy wrapped in intimacy. He was offering her a role in his world with the understanding that it was temporary, transactional, and potentially deadly. Adrian, darling! A woman's voice cut through the music, cultured, confident, edged with steel. I've been looking everywhere for you. Lena felt Adrian's hand tighten almost imperceptibly at her waist. She had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would alter the entire trajectory of her life. 3 seconds to choose between invisible safety and dangerous visibility. 3 seconds to decide if she was brave enough or reckless enough to say yes. Elena Petrov glided toward them with predatory grace, her crimson dress a slash of color against the sea of pastels and neutrals. She was beautiful in a way that felt weaponized. Perfect bone structure, immaculate makeup, diamonds that caught the light with every movement. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she took in Lena still in Adrian's arms. I don't believe we've been introduced, Elena said, her tone making it clear she considered Lena beneath the effort of introduction. This was the moment. Refuse, and Lena would return to her corner table, invisible and safe. Accept, and she would become something else entirely. Adrian Volkov's fiancé, a player in games she didn't understand, a target for people who made their living in violence and strategy. Lena looked up at Adrian and saw the question in his eyes. Not pressure. He would let her walk away if she chose. But also recognition. He saw the same thing in her that she'd felt stirring since the moment he'd approached. Hunger for something more than the small, safe life she'd been assigned. "Actually," Lena heard herself say, her voice steady and clear, "we haven't been formally introduced, but I'm sure Adrian is about to remedy that." Adrian's eyes flashed with something fierce and approving. His arm tightened around her waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture of unmistakable possession. "Elena," he said, his voice carrying just enough to ensure nearby guests would overhear, "I'd like you to meet Lena Rivera, my fiancée." The reaction was immediate and electric. Elena's perfect composure cracked, shock flashing across her features before she could smooth it away. Around them, Lena heard gasps, sudden whispers, the rustle of people turning to stare. The music continued, but several couples had stopped dancing, their attention fixed on the unfolding drama. "Your fiancé?" Elena's voice had gone brittle. "That's impossible. You weren't engaged 3 days ago." "I move quickly when I find something worth keeping," Adrian replied, his tone casual in a way that felt calculated to wound. "I'm surprised the news hasn't reached you yet. We've been quite open about it in certain circles." It was a beautiful lie, delivered with such confidence that Lena almost believed it herself. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, saw the exact moment when recognition flared, not of who she was, but of who she'd suddenly become. Adrian Volkov's chosen woman, someone who mattered. "How lovely," Elena managed, though fury simmered beneath the polite words. "And so unexpected. Tell me, Miss Rivera, what is it you do?" The question was designed to expose Lena's ordinariness, to highlight the absurdity of her sudden elevation. Before tonight, it would have worked. Lena would have stammered through an explanation of her administrative job, felt shame at her modest circumstances, shrunk under the weight of Elena's disdain. But she'd already said yes to something far more dangerous than social embarrassment. "I make Adrian happy," Lena replied with a small smile. "That seems to be more than enough." Adrian's hand moved to the small of her back, support and approval. More than enough indeed. Elena's eyes narrowed, calculation replacing shock. "Well, this is certainly news. I'm sure everyone will be fascinated to learn more about you, Miss Rivera. Your background, your family, how exactly you captured Adrian's notoriously guarded heart." The threat was barely veiled. Elena would dig, would search for ammunition, would find every vulnerability Lena possessed and exploit it ruthlessly. "I look forward to the speculation," Lena said, surprised by her own audacity. "Though I suspect the truth is far less interesting than whatever stories people will invent." "Indeed," Elena's smile turned sharp. "I suppose we'll see. If you'll excuse me, I should inform my father about this development. I'm sure he'll be as surprised as I am." She swept away, crimson dress trailing behind her like a warning flag. The moment she was out of earshot, Lena felt her knees go weak. Adrian's arm tightened, keeping her upright. "Breathe," he murmured against her ear. "You were perfect." "I just made an enemy of someone dangerous, didn't I?" "You did, but you also gained a far more dangerous ally." Adrian turned her so they were facing each other again, though the pretense of dancing had dissolved. "Elena will tell her father within the hour. Viktor Petrov will take this as the declaration of war I intended it to be. From this moment forward, you're under my protection. That means security, resources, and complete loyalty from everyone in my organization." The reality of what she'd agreed to was beginning to settle over Lena like a second skin, heavier than she'd anticipated, but also strangely exhilarating. "What happens now?" "Now," Adrian said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "we make sure everyone here knows exactly who you are." He kept his arm around her waist as he guided her through the ballroom, stopping to introduce her to politicians and business magnates, society matrons, and influential journalists. Each introduction was the same. "Lena Rivera, my fiancée." And each time Lena watched faces transform, initial skepticism giving way to calculation as they realized Adrian's choice made her someone worth cultivating. Senator Ashford himself approached, his smile tight with poorly concealed anxiety. "Adrian, I had no idea you were bringing a guest. If I'd known—" "It was a recent development," Adrian said smoothly. "Lena, this is Senator Ashford, our host. Senator Lena Rivera. Charming to meet you, my dear." The senator's handshake was perfunctory, but his eyes assessed her with the keen attention of a man who made his living reading people. "How did you two meet?" Lena opened her mouth, but Adrian spoke first. "Through mutual interests. I was immediately taken with her intelligence and directness, qualities I find far more valuable than the usual social performances." It was another calculated statement, a subtle dig at exactly the kind of political maneuvering the senator built his career on. Ashford's smile stiffened. "Well, congratulations to you both. I'm sure this will be the talk of the evening." "The season, I imagine," Adrian replied. "You know how people love a surprise." As the senator moved away, Lena whispered, "Did you just insult him?" "I reminded him that I don't play by his rules. There's a difference." "Not much of one." Adrian's eyes gleamed. "You're learning." The evening continued in a surreal blur. Lena met more people in 2 hours than she had in the past 2 years, each introduction reinforcing her new identity as Adrian Volkov's chosen partner. The woman who'd mocked her dress earlier appeared at her elbow, suddenly eager to discuss fashion and apologize for the misunderstanding about the seating arrangements. Others who'd looked through her now competed for her attention, their desperation to curry favor both flattering and repulsive. Through it all, Adrian remained at her side, possessive, protective, playing the role of devoted fiancé with such conviction that Lena sometimes forgot it was performance. His hand stayed at her waist or tangled with hers, a constant reminder of the claim he'd staked. When men's gazes lingered too long, his arm would tighten almost imperceptibly. When women's questions became too probing, he would deflect with practiced ease. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Around midnight, Sarah finally found her, eyes wide with shock. "Lena, what the hell is going on? People are saying you're engaged to Adrian Volkov." Lena glanced at Adrian, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Permission to speak to her friend privately. "Can we step outside?" They made their way to one of the estate's terraces, away from the crush of guests. The night air was cool against Lena's overheated skin, stars barely visible through the ambient light of the city beyond. "Tell me this is some kind of joke," Sarah said the moment they were alone. "Please tell me you're not actually engaged to the most dangerous man in the city." Lena started, then stopped. How could she explain a decision she barely understood herself? "It's complicated." "Complicated?" "Lena, that man owns half the criminal underworld. People disappear for crossing him, and you're just, marrying him now?" "It's not real," Lena said quietly. "It's an arrangement. Business." Sarah's expression shifted from panic to horror. "That's worse. Lena, do you understand what you've gotten yourself into? When you're no longer useful, he needs me for 6 months. Maybe less." Even as she said it, Lena heard the absurdity. "After that, we'll stage a quiet breakup, and I'll walk away." "With what? A target on your back? The enemies you've made tonight won't just forget about you because the engagement ends." Sarah gripped Lena's arms. "Come with me right now. We'll leave through the service entrance. You can disappear before this gets any worse." For a moment, Lena was tempted. Sarah was right. This was insane, dangerous, potentially fatal. Everything rational screamed at her to run. But she thought about the moment Adrian had looked at her across the ballroom, about the defiance that had sparked in her chest when he'd offered her visibility instead of invisibility. She thought about years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as though her presence or absence made no difference to anyone. "I can't," Lena said softly. "I already said yes." "Then unsay it." "Sarah." "Miss Rivera?" A man appeared at the terrace entrance, tall, built like a weapon, with cold eyes that assessed them both in an instant. "Mr. Volkov requests your presence." Sarah's fingers tightened. "Lana, please." But Lena was already pulling away, already moving toward the man who represented everything she'd agreed to. "I'll call you tomorrow, I promise." "You better," Sarah's voice cracked. "Because if you don't, I'll assume the worst." The man, security, clearly, led Lena back through the ballroom to a quieter corridor lined with the senator's private collection of modern art. Adrian stood before a painting that looked like chaos frozen in motion, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Marcus," Adrian said without turning around. The security guard melted back into shadows. leaving them alone. Your friend is worried. She has reason to be. Yes? Adrian finally looked at her, and something in his expression had softened fractionally. You can still walk away, Lena. The announcement has been made, which serves my immediate purpose. If you want to disappear tonight, I won't stop you. Lena studied him, trying to read the calculation behind the offer. Would you protect me if I left? No. The honesty was brutal and somehow refreshing. No promises he couldn't keep, no false reassurances. Just the truth. If she walked away now, she'd be on her own. But if I stay, then you're mine to protect until our arrangement ends. Complete security, complete loyalty, complete access to resources most people can't imagine. Adrian stepped closer. And the guarantee that anyone who threatens you answers to me. Why? The question burst out before Lena could stop it. You could have chosen anyone, someone from your world who understands the rules. Why pick me? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because when I looked at you tonight, I saw someone who was tired of being invisible, someone with enough defiance to meet my eyes instead of looking away. Someone smart enough to understand what I was offering and brave enough or reckless enough to take it. His hand came up to cup her jaw, thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. I needed someone who wouldn't fall in love with the illusion of who I am. And you, Lena Rivera, are far too pragmatic for that particular mistake. The words should have stung. Instead, they felt like recognition. He saw her clearly, not as some romantic fantasy, but as exactly who she was. And somehow that mattered more than any pretty lie. So what happens now? Lena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian's hand dropped back to his side. Now we leave together, in full view of everyone who matters. Tomorrow, we'll deal with logistics, moving you into my penthouse, establishing your cover story, introducing you to my people. But tonight, we make sure the image is perfect. And Elena Petrov? Elena will make her move soon. Probably tomorrow, once her father has time to strategize. Adrian's expression hardened. She'll try to discredit you, find leverage, prove that our engagement is a sham. Your job is to be exactly who you claim to be tonight. My fiancé, confident and untouchable. I don't know how to be untouchable. You'll learn. He offered his arm. Ready to make an exit that ensures you're the only thing people talk about tomorrow? Lena slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. As ready as I'll ever be. They walked back into the ballroom together, and Lena felt the shift immediately. Every eye tracking their movement, every conversation pausing as they passed. Adrian led her to the center of the room where the bride and groom were cutting their cake, the perfect moment of celebration that would now be overshadowed by what came next. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian said, his voice carrying easily across the space without shouting. The room fell silent. Thank you to Senator and Mrs. Ashford for hosting such a beautiful celebration. It seems fitting that on an evening dedicated to love and new beginnings, I should share some news of my own. Lena felt her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Adrian's arm slipped around her waist, pulling her against his side. I've asked Lena Rivera to marry me, Adrian continued, looking down at her with an expression that would have convinced Lena herself if she didn't know better. And she's made me the happiest man alive by saying yes. The applause was thunderous, genuine joy from some, calculated enthusiasm from others who understood the political implications. Lena caught glimpses of faces in the crowd, Elena's mask of fury, Sarah's worried eyes, the senator's forced smile, dozens of strangers who would wake up tomorrow knowing her name. Adrian leaned down as though to kiss her cheek, but his lips brushed her ear instead. Smile like you mean it. This is what you wanted. And despite everything, the danger, the deception, the absolute insanity of what she'd agreed to, Lena found herself smiling genuinely, because he was right. This was what she'd wanted, to matter, to be seen, to step out of invisible safety into dangerous visibility. The applause continued as Adrian guided her toward the exit, bodyguards materializing from shadows to form a protective corridor. Lena caught one last glimpse of the ballroom, the glittering chandeliers, the shocked faces, the world she'd been on the periphery of for so long. Then they were through the doors, down marble steps, and sliding into the back of a black SUV with windows tinted to opacity. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing them into leather-scented dimness. The driver pulled away from the estate smoothly, leaving behind the event that had transformed Lena's entire existence in the span of a few hours. She stared out the window at the passing lights of the city, trying to process everything that had happened. "Second thoughts?" Adrian asked from beside her. "Several thousand." Lena turned to look at him. In the dim light filtering through the tinted windows, his features were all angles and shadows. "But it's too late for those, isn't it?" "Yes. No false comfort, just honesty. The moment you said yes, you became part of my world. There's no unmarking that. What happens to me when this ends? When we stage our breakup and I'm no longer useful to you?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. "That depends on how well you play your role. If you're convincing enough, smart enough, discreet enough, then when we separate, you'll do so with enough money to disappear anywhere you choose. New identity if you want it, resources to start over, connections that owe me favors. And if I'm not convincing enough, then my enemies will have already killed you, so the question becomes moot." The bluntness should have terrified her. Instead, Lena felt a strange calm settling over her shoulders. At least with Adrian, she knew exactly where she stood. No pretty lies about safety or certainty. Just the brutal truth that she'd traded invisible safety for dangerous visibility, and now she had to be smart enough to survive it. "Where are we going?" Lena asked. "My penthouse. Your things will be collected from your apartment tomorrow." "Just like that? I don't get a say?" "Do you want to return to your apartment tonight, unguarded, now that Elena and her father know exactly who you are?" Lena thought about her tiny studio with its cheap lock and street-level windows. "No? Then you're coming home with me." Adrian's phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. Viktor Petrov just requested a meeting, tomorrow at noon. That was fast. He's furious. Elena was his best play for an alliance with my organization. By choosing you instead, I've humiliated his daughter and rejected his overtures publicly. Adrian typed a quick response. He'll try to end this engagement any way he can. Should I be afraid of him? Yes. But you should be more afraid of disappointing me. The threat was delivered casually, but Lena felt its weight. She'd chosen to step into Adrian's world, which meant living by his rules and meeting his expectations. Failure wasn't just personal, it was potentially fatal. The SUV pulled up to a gleaming high-rise in the city's most expensive district. Adrian's building, she assumed. The lobby they entered was all marble and gold, minimalist luxury that whispered rather than shouted its wealth. A private elevator carried them to the top floor in smooth silence. Adrian's penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in blacks and grays, art that Lena suspected was worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. It should have felt cold, but instead it felt powerful, like its owner. "Guest room is down that hall," Adrian said, shrugging out of his jacket. "You'll find clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom. My people work quickly." Lena blinked. "You already had clothes brought here?" "I make decisions rapidly when necessary. Waiting would have been inefficient." He loosened his tie. "We have a meeting with my publicity team at 8 tomorrow morning. They'll brief you on your cover story, the narrative we're building, what to say if approached by press." "Press?" Lena repeated faintly. "Right. Because my fake engagement to a crime boss would absolutely make the news." "Business magnate," Adrian corrected with a slight smile. "No one has ever successfully proven the crime boss allegations. Is that supposed to be reassuring?" "No, it's supposed to be accurate." He moved toward what she assumed was the master bedroom, then paused. "Lena?" "Yes?" "You did well tonight. Better than I anticipated." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be considerably harder." Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone in a penthouse that cost more per month than she made in a year, engaged to a man she'd met hours ago, playing a role that could get her killed. She should have been terrified. Instead, as she made her way to the guest room and found a closet full of designer clothes in exactly her size, Lena felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Power. For the first time in her life, she mattered. People knew her name, feared her connection, wanted her favor. And if the price of that power was dancing with danger and lying to the world, well, Lena had spent years being invisible and safe. It was time to discover what visible and dangerous felt like. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disorienting realization that she wasn't in her cramped studio apartment. The guest room was 3 times the size of her entire living space, decorated in soft grays and creams that probably had pretentious names like Morning Mist and Champagne Silk. For a moment, she lay still, half convinced the previous night had been some fever dream brought on by bad champagne and social anxiety. Then she saw the ring. It sat on the nightstand in a black velvet box, the diamond catching morning light and throwing rainbow fractals across the ceiling. Lena reached for it with trembling fingers, lifting the ring from its cushion. The stone was obscene, easily 3 carats, flawless, set in platinum with smaller diamonds circling the band. The kind of ring that declared ownership and wealth in equal measure. A note lay beneath the box in sharp, masculine handwriting. Wear it. The story is that I proposed 3 weeks ago. You said yes immediately. We've been keeping it quiet until the right moment to announce. 8 a.m. meeting, don't be late. A. Lena slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, of course. Adrian struck her as the type of man who ensured every detail aligned with his vision. The weight of it felt foreign, almost aggressive, a constant reminder of the role she'd agreed to play. She found the bathroom stocked with luxury toiletries that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The shower had 6 different settings and water pressure that felt like a massage. By the time Lena emerged, wrapped in a towel that was somehow both impossibly soft and impossibly heavy, she'd almost convinced herself she could do this. Play the part. Survive 6 months in Adrian's world. Walk away with enough money to start over somewhere far from this glittering, dangerous city. The closet held an entire wardrobe in her size. Dresses, slacks, blouses, shoes that made her own modest collection look like dollar store rejects. She chose a tailored navy suit that felt like armor, paired with heels that added 3 inches to her height. When she checked the mirror, a stranger looked back, polished, confident, expensive. Someone who could stand beside Adrian Volkov and not look like an imposter. Almost. Lena found Adrian in the kitchen, already dressed in a charcoal suit, drinking espresso while scanning his phone. He glanced up when she entered, his eyes making a quick assessment that felt clinical rather than appreciative. "The suit works," he said. "Marcus picked well." "Marcus?" "Head of security. He coordinated your wardrobe." Adrian set down his phone. "Coffee?" "Please." He poured her a cup from an elaborate machine that probably cost more than her car, then slid it across the marble counter. The coffee was perfect, rich, smooth, exactly the right temperature. Of course it was. "Nervous?" Adrian asked, watching her over the rim of his own cup. "Terrified," Lena admitted, "but I assume that's not an acceptable answer." "It's honest, which is more useful than bravado." He checked his watch. "The publicity team arrives in 20 minutes. Their job is to create a narrative that explains our relationship in a way that satisfies curiosity without inviting too much scrutiny. Your job is to memorize every detail of that narrative and never deviate from it." "What if I'm asked something we haven't prepared for?" "Deflect, smile, say something vague about privacy." Adrian's expression hardened slightly. "What you don't do is panic and improvise. Inconsistencies get people killed in my world." The casual way he mentioned death made Lena's stomach clench, but she forced herself to nod. "Understood." "Good." He moved around the counter, reaching for her left hand. His thumb brushed over the engagement ring with something that might have been satisfaction. "This stays on at all times. You're mine now, as far as the world is concerned. That means certain behaviors are expected." "Such as?" "Affection in public. Not excessive, but enough to be convincing. You'll need to learn to tolerate my touch without flinching." His hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer with the same casual possession he'd displayed at the wedding. "Like this. Natural, comfortable, as though we've done this 1,000 times." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to relax into his hold. "How's this?" "Better." Adrian's other hand came up to tilt her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. This close, she could see flecks of darker gray in his irises, the precise line of his jaw, the faint scar above his left eyebrow. "When we're in public, you look at me like I'm the only person in the room. Can you do that?" I don't know. Can you look at me like I'm more than a strategic asset? A slow smile curved his lips. Probably not, but I can fake it well enough to fool everyone watching. Comforting. It's supposed to be practical. He released her, stepping back with the same calculated precision he brought to everything. The team will be here soon. Try to eat something? You'll need the energy. The publicity team consisted of 3 people who entered Adrian's penthouse like they owned it. A severe woman named Victoria, who seemed to be in charge, a younger man named James, who took notes on everything, and a woman named Sophia, who immediately started photographing Lena from various angles. Stop, Sophia said after the 5th photo. Smile less. You're supposed to be in love, not selling toothpaste. I am smiling less, Lena protested. Then smile differently, softer, like you know a secret. Sophia adjusted her camera. Think about something that makes you genuinely happy. Lena tried to think of something, but her mind kept circling back to the surreal absurdity of her situation. She was standing in a penthouse worth millions, wearing clothes she couldn't afford, pretending to be engaged to a man who'd picked her out of a crowd like selecting produce at a market. Better, Sophia said, snapping several more photos. That's the one. Little bit mysterious, little bit amused, perfect. Victoria had spread a series of documents across Adrian's dining table, each one covered in dense text and strategic talking points. Lena, sit. We have work to do. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in creating a convincing lie. Victoria walked Lena through every aspect of her new identity. How she and Adrian had met at a charity auction 6 months ago, how he'd pursued her despite her initial resistance, how the proposal had happened during a private dinner at his estate. Every detail was crafted to explain their relationship while revealing as little actual information as possible. You work in arts administration, Victoria said, sliding a fabricated resume across the table. Specifically, you coordinate private collections for high net worth individuals. It explains why you move in adjacent circles to Adrian without being part of his immediate world. It also gives you a reason to be knowledgeable about art, culture, and discretion. Lena scanned the resume, which listed jobs she'd never held and qualifications she didn't possess. What if someone asks me about specific pieces or artists? You defer to your client's privacy, James interjected, still typing on his laptop. Say you're contractually obligated not to discuss their collections. It's bulletproof. And if they press? Then you smile and change the subject, Victoria said flatly. You're not on trial, Lena. You're Adrian Volkov's fiancée. That status alone should discourage most aggressive questioning. And when it doesn't? Adrian, who'd been silent throughout the briefing, spoke from where he leaned against the kitchen counter. Then I intervene. You're not expected to handle hostile interrogation on your own. But I should be able to handle normal conversation without falling apart, Lena finished. Exactly. Sophia returned from wherever she'd disappeared to, tablet in hand. Social media accounts are ready. We've backdated posts to support the 6-month timeline. A few carefully curated photos, some vague captions about new beginnings. Nothing too obvious. She turned the tablet to show Lena a version of herself that had apparently existed for months, dining at expensive restaurants, attending gallery openings, living a life of quiet sophistication. The photos were skillfully edited composites, Lena's face grafted onto scenes she'd never witnessed. This is insane, Lena breathed. This is necessary, Victoria corrected. By tomorrow morning, journalists will be combing through every aspect of your life. We're giving them a story that satisfies their curiosity without providing ammunition. You're cultured, but private, successful, but not flashy, exactly the kind of woman Adrian Volkov would choose. And what about my real life? My actual job, my friends, my apartment? Your apartment lease has been terminated. Belongings are being moved to storage, James said without looking up from his laptop. Your employer has been informed you're taking an extended leave for personal reasons. As for friends, you'll need to be selective about contact. Anyone in your life becomes a potential liability. The reality of what she'd agreed to was settling over Lena like concrete, heavy, suffocating, permanent. She'd known, intellectually, that saying yes to Adrian meant leaving her old life behind. But having it dismantled in real time by strangers felt viscerally wrong. Sarah, Lena said, my roommate, she knows this isn't real. Victoria's expression hardened. Then she's a problem. She's my friend. She won't say anything. People say things when frightened, or bribed, or threatened. Victoria turned to Adrian. Recommendation? Adrian's eyes met Lena's, and she saw the calculation happening behind them. How loyal is she? Completely, Lena said, putting more conviction into the words than she felt. Sarah was loyal, but everyone had limits. She won't betray me. See that she doesn't. Adrian pushed off from the counter. Have Marcus arrange a conversation. Make it clear that Lena's safety depends on her discretion. That's a threat, Lena said. Yes. I don't want Sarah intimidated. And I don't want your friend's inability to keep secrets getting you killed. Adrian's voice didn't rise, but authority threaded through every word. This isn't negotiable, Lena. Everyone in your life either becomes an asset or a liability. Sarah can choose which. Before Lena could argue further, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something shifted in his expression. Petrov. Earlier than expected. He answered, switching to speaker. Victor. Adrian? The voice that emerged was smooth, cultured, edged with steel. Congratulations on your engagement. Such surprising news. I'm glad you heard. Lena is extraordinary. I'm sure she is. Perhaps you'd allow me the pleasure of meeting her. I'd like to welcome her to our community properly. It wasn't a request. Lena could hear the command beneath the polite phrasing, the expectation that Adrian would comply. Of course, Adrian replied easily. Lunch today? My club? 1 o'clock? Perfect. I look forward to it. The call ended. Adrian set down his phone with deliberate care, his expression unreadable. That was a trap, Lena said. Obviously. So, why accept? Because refusing would be an insult that accelerates conflict I'm not ready for yet. Adrian turned to Victoria. Clear my afternoon, and get Lena ready for Victor Petrov. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. He'll try to break her. I know. She's not ready. Then make her ready. You have 4 hours. The publicity team departed with the same efficiency they'd arrived, leaving Lena alone with Adrian and a growing sense of dread. Victor Petrov was the man whose daughter she'd publicly humiliated, the man who'd been planning to ally his organization with Adrian's through marriage, the man who now saw Lena as an obstacle to be removed. Tell me about him, Lena said. Adrian moved to the windows, looking out over the city with the air of a king surveying his territory. Victor Petrov runs the largest smuggling operation on the East Coast. Weapons, art, occasionally people when the price is right. He's intelligent, ruthless, and deeply offended by last night's announcement. Because I'm not good enough for you? Because you're not Elena, and therefore not useful to his ambitions. Adrian turned to face her. He'll try to determine if our engagement is real. If he suspects it's strategic, he'll find ways to exploit that weakness. Your job is to convince him you're genuinely in love with me. How am I supposed to do that? The same way you convinced everyone at the wedding. Be confident. Don't apologize for your presence. And remember that in Victor's world, weakness is an invitation to attack. Lena's hands trembled slightly, and she clenched them into fists. What if I can't do this? Adrian crossed the space between them in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders with enough force to ground her. Then we're both in trouble. Victor doesn't make idle threats, and he doesn't leave loose ends. If he decides you're a vulnerability rather than a legitimate part of my life, he'll arrange for you to disappear. Disappear, Lena repeated faintly. Permanently. His grip tightened. So you need to be perfect, Lena. Perfectly in love, perfectly confident, perfectly convinced that you belong at my side. Can you do that? She wanted to say no, wanted to run back to her safe, invisible life, where the worst thing that happened was being mocked for her dress. But that life was gone, dismantled by her own choice. There was only forward now, into danger she barely understood. Yes, Lena heard herself say. I can do that. Good. Adrian released her. Marcus will drive us to the club. On the way, I'll brief you on Victor's tells, his weaknesses, and how to avoid his traps. Pay attention. Your life depends on it. The car ride to Adrian's club was a crash course in reading one of the city's most dangerous men. Marcus drove while Adrian sat beside Lena in the back, his voice low and precise as he detailed everything she needed to know. Victor will try to separate us, Adrian said. Suggest you take a tour of the club, ask you to step away for a private conversation. Don't go. Stay within my line of sight at all times. What if that seems rude? Better rude than dead. Victor respects strength, not politeness. What about Elena? Will she be there? Probably. She'll want to assess her competition. Adrian's hand found Lena's, his fingers lacing through hers with practiced ease. If she approaches you, be cordial but not warm. You have nothing to prove to her. Except that I'm actually engaged to you and not just a strategic replacement. Which you'll prove by being completely comfortable in my presence. No nervousness, no deference, no uncertainty. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. We've been together 6 months. I've touched you 1,000 times. This, he lifted their joined hands, is as natural as breathing. Lena focused on the warmth of his hand, the callous texture of his palm, the way his fingers dwarfed hers. She needed to memorize the feeling, make it familiar enough that she could recreate ease she didn't feel. What if he asks about my family? Lena asked. Your parents died in a car accident when you were 19. You have no siblings. It's tragic, but not unusual, and it explains why you're not bringing family into our engagement. Another lie, as carefully constructed as all the others. Lena's actual parents were alive and well in Oregon, happily unaware that their daughter had fake engaged herself to a crime boss. Eventually, she'd have to tell them something, but that was a problem for future Lena. The club occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district, accessible only through a private elevator that required both a key card and biometric scan. The interior was all dark wood and leather, old money and older secrets. Men in expensive suits conducted quiet conversations over single malt scotch, each one radiating the kind of power that came from controlling things most people never saw. Mr. Volkov, the maitre d' greeted them with the deference reserved for royalty. Mr. Petrov is waiting in the Bordeaux room. Adrian's hand settled at the small of Lena's back, guiding her through the club with the easy authority of someone who owned every space he entered. Heads turned as they passed, recognition and calculation flashing across faces. Word of their engagement had clearly spread through the right channels. The Bordeaux room was a private dining space with windows overlooking the city and a single table set for 4. Viktor Petrov stood as they entered, and Lena's first thought was that he looked like someone's favorite uncle. Silver hair, warm smile, expensive but understated suit. Then she met his eyes and saw the predator beneath the affable exterior. Adrian, Victor said warmly, extending his hand. And this must be the famous Lena Rivera. Lena, Viktor Petrov, Adrian said smoothly. One of the city's most respected businessmen and a longtime colleague. The word colleague carried layers of meaning that Lena was only beginning to understand. She offered her hand and Victor took it with both of his grip firm and assessing. Enchanted, Victor said. My daughter speaks very highly of your memorable introduction. Elena was gracious, Lena replied, keeping her voice steady. I hope we'll have the opportunity to know each other better. Oh, I'm certain you will. Victor released her hand, but not her gaze. Please sit. I took the liberty of ordering champagne. We should celebrate your engagement properly. The 4th chair remained conspicuously empty until, moments later, Elena Petrov entered the room. She looked stunning in an emerald dress that probably cost more than Lena's fabricated monthly salary, her expression carefully neutral as she took in the scene. Darling, Victor said, you remember Adrian and his fiancée. Of course. Elena's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Lena, what a lovely ring. Thank you, Lena said, resisting the urge to hide her left hand. Adrian has excellent taste. Indeed he does. Elena's eyes flicked to her father, some silent communication passing between them. Though I admit the engagement came as quite a surprise. Adrian has always been so particular about his private life. Lena is worth making exceptions for, Adrian said, his arm sliding around Lena's shoulders with possessive ease. Some things are too valuable to keep hidden. The champagne arrived, poured by a server who disappeared as quickly as he'd come. Victor raised his glass with that same warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. To new beginnings, he said, and unexpected alliances. They drank, the champagne bitter on Lena's tongue. She could feel the weight of assessment from both Petrovs, could practically see them cataloging every detail of her appearance and behavior, searching for cracks in the facade. "So, Lena," Victor began as appetizers were served, "Adrian tells me you work in arts administration. Fascinating field." "I enjoy it," Lena replied carefully. "Helping collectors curate meaningful acquisitions is rewarding work." "I'm sure it is. Do you have a specialty? Impressionism? Modern works?" This was the first test. Victoria had briefed her on how to deflect without seeming evasive. "I prefer not to discuss my clients' interests publicly. Discretion is essential in my field." Of course, of course." Victor's smile widened. "Though I imagine working with Adrian's collection must be particularly interesting. He has such eclectic tastes." Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on Lena's shoulder. A warning. She was being led into a trap. If she claimed knowledge of Adrian's collection, Victor could verify and find inconsistencies. If she denied involvement, it would seem strange for a fiancé in the arts field. "Adrian keeps his personal collection separate from my professional work," Lena said smoothly. "We try not to mix business with pleasure." "How disciplined," Elena interjected, her tone suggesting anything but admiration. "Most couples I know love collaborating on shared interests." "Lena and I have other ways of collaborating," Adrian said, his voice carrying just enough suggestion to make the implication clear. His fingers traced a light pattern on Lena's shoulder, intimate and possessive. "Art is her passion. I prefer not to dilute it with my amateur opinions." It was a deflection wrapped in affection, exactly the kind of response a genuine couple would give. Lena leaned slightly into Adrian's touch, selling the comfort and familiarity Victoria had insisted they portray. Victor watched this exchange with unreadable eyes. "How long did you say you'd been together?" 6 months, Lena replied, "though it feels longer, in the best way." "And the proposal?" 3 weeks ago, Adrian supplied. "Private dinner at my estate. I'd been planning it for months." "How romantic," Elena's voice dripped with skepticism. And yet no one in our circle had heard even a whisper about Adrian Volkov being in a serious relationship. Remarkable, considering how closely we all watch each other. "Maybe you weren't watching closely enough," Lena said before she could stop herself. The room went silent. Elena's eyes flashed with something dangerous, and Victor's expression sharpened with interest. Adrian's hand on her shoulder conveyed approval, even as Lena's heart hammered with the realization that she'd just challenged Elena Petrov in front of her father. Then Victor laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made him more frightening. "Spirit, I like that. You'll need it, married to Adrian." "I'm not worried," Lena said, doubling down on the confidence she didn't quite feel. "Adrian doesn't intimidate me." "Then you're either very brave or very foolish." Victor's smile remained, but his eyes had gone cold. "Adrian Volkov is many things, but safe has never been among them." "I never wanted safe," Lena replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I wanted real." It was the truth, she realized, maybe the only truth in this entire fabricated story. She had chosen danger over invisibility, complexity over safety. Whatever else was a lie, that part was devastatingly honest. Adrian's fingers traced along her collarbone, a gesture of such casual intimacy that it sent heat flooding through Lena's chest. "And I wanted someone who wouldn't bore me within a month. It seems we both got what we wanted." The rest of lunch passed in a careful dance of probing questions and deflected answers. Victor tested Lena repeatedly, asking about her background, her family, her work, her intentions. Each question was a trap waiting to be sprung, and Lena navigated them with increasing confidence, learning to read the subtle signals Adrian sent through touch and tone. Elena mostly watched, her silence more unnerving than her father's aggressive questioning. When she did speak, it was to make pointed observations about how quickly the engagement had progressed, how unusual it was for Adrian to make such a public commitment, how fascinating it would be to see if the relationship could withstand scrutiny. By the time dessert arrived, Lena's nerves were stretched so thin she could barely taste the chocolate torte that was probably exquisite. Every muscle in her body screamed with tension for maintaining the performance, smiling at the right moments, laughing at Adrian's subtle jokes, allowing his touch with apparent ease, projecting confidence she absolutely did not feel. "Well," Victor said as coffee was poured, "this has been illuminating. Lena, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Lena asked. "Someone more pliable. Adrian usually prefers women who know their place." The insult was deliberate, designed to provoke a reaction. Lena felt Adrian tense beside her, but she spoke before he could intervene. "Then I suppose Adrian's taste has evolved," she said calmly. "People change when they find something worth changing for." Victor's eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect or might have been calculation. "Indeed they do. I look forward to seeing how this plays out." "Plays out?" Adrian's voice dropped several degrees. "You say that like it's a game, Victor." "Isn't everything?" Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. "Thank you for lunch, Adrian. And Lena, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other." Elena rose as well, her expression unreadable. As they prepared to leave, she leaned close to Lena, her voice barely a whisper. "Enjoy your moment. They never last as long as you think." Then the Petrovs were gone, leaving Lena alone with Adrian and the weight of what had just transpired. "How did I do?" Lena asked once the door closed behind them. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his expression difficult to read. "You called Elena out directly. That was either brilliant or suicidal." "Which do you think?" "Both." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, we need to leave before Victor has time to arrange surveillance on this room." The ride back to the penthouse was tense. Marcus drove with his eyes constantly checking mirrors, taking a route that doubled back on itself several times. Adrian made a series of calls in rapid-fire Russian, his tone sharp with command. "What's happening?" Lena asked when he finally set down his phone. "Victor is making moves. He's reached out to 3 of my suppliers, testing loyalties. He's also hired a private investigator to look into your background." Lena's stomach dropped. "Will they find anything?" "They'll find exactly what we want them to find." Victoria anticipated this. Adrian's jaw tightened. "But it means the timeline is accelerating. Victor won't wait 6 months to verify whether our engagement is real. He'll push, prod, and test until something breaks." "So what do? We make it impossible to question, starting tonight." Adrian turned to face her fully. "There's a gala at the Metropolitan Museum. Black tie, 500 of the city's most influential people. We're going to attend together, and you're going to be perfect." "Adrian, I don't... This isn't negotiable, Lena. Victor will be there. Elena will be there. Everyone who matters will be watching to see if we're real or if you're just a beautiful distraction I'll discard within weeks." His eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. "You wanted to matter. This is what it costs." He was right, and Lena hated how right he was. She'd chosen this path, stepped willingly into his world. Now she had to survive it. "Fine," she said. "But I'll need a dress." "Already handled. It's being delivered within the hour." Adrian's phone buzzed again, and he glanced at it with a frown. "Along with a security detail. Marcus will brief you on protocol." "Security? At a museum gala?" Elena made a threat. Small, easily dismissed, but Victor's daughter doesn't make idle comments. Where you go, protection goes. He met her eyes. "This is real now, Lena. The danger, the scrutiny, all of it. Are you ready for that?" Lena thought about her tiny apartment, her forgettable job, her invisible life. Then she thought about the way people had looked at her at the wedding after Adrian claimed her, with respect, with fear, with recognition. "I'm ready," she said. She hoped it wasn't a lie. The dress arrived in a garment bag that probably cost more than Lena's previous monthly rent, carried by a woman who introduced herself as Margot and proceeded to transform the guest bedroom into a styling suite. Within minutes, makeup palettes covered the dresser, shoes lined the floor, and jewelry sparkled under carefully arranged lighting. "Arms up," Margot commanded, and Lena complied, letting the woman slip the gown over her head. The fabric whispered against her skin like a secret, midnight blue silk that seemed to absorb light and reflect it back as something richer, darker, infinitely more expensive. The neckline plunged just enough to be daring without crossing into scandalous, and the back was nearly non-existent, leaving her spine exposed to the air. "I can't wear this," Lena said, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked dangerous in a way Lena had never been. Sophisticated, powerful, the kind of person who belonged on Adrian Volkov's arm. "You can and you will," Margot replied, already working on Lena's hair with professional efficiency. "Mr. Volkov was very specific about the impression you need to make tonight. Confident, untouchable, his equal in every way that matters. I'm not his equal." "Then fake it better." Margot met her eyes in the mirror. "The moment you walk into that gala, every woman in the room will be looking for reasons you don't belong. Your job is to make them question their own standing instead." An hour later, Lena barely recognized herself. Her dark hair had been swept into an elegant updo that exposed the vulnerable curve of her neck. Margot had done something magical with makeup that made her eyes look larger, more dramatic, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut. Diamond earrings that Adrian had sent up with the dress caught the light with every movement, and heels added 4 inches to her height, changing her posture into something that approached regal. "Perfect," Margot said, stepping back to assess her work. "One last thing." She draped a necklace around Lena's throat, a delicate chain holding a single sapphire that settled just above the hollow of her collarbone. The stone was the exact color of the dress, the exact color of midnight water, and probably worth more than everything Lena had owned in her previous life combined. "This is too much," Lena whispered. "It's exactly enough," Margot corrected. "Remember, you're Adrian Volkov's fiancée now. These are the trappings of that position. Wear them like armor." Adrian was waiting in the living room when Lena emerged, and the expression that crossed his face when he saw her was worth every moment of discomfort the transformation had required. He'd changed into a tuxedo that looked custom-made, all sharp lines and elegant simplicity, but it was the way his eyes tracked over her that made Lena's breath catch. "You look," he started, then stopped, something that might have been genuine appreciation flickering across his features before he shuddered it. "Acceptable." "Acceptable," Lena repeated flatly. "I'm wearing a dress that costs more than a car, and you say acceptable. Would you prefer I waxed poetic about your beauty?" A hint of amusement colored his tone. "We both know this is strategic, Lena, but for what it's worth, you'll make every other woman at the gala look underdressed." "That's the goal?" "Part of it." Adrian moved closer, and Lena caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive that probably had a pretentious name. "The other part is making you look so completely comfortable in my world that no one questions whether you belong." He reached up to adjust the sapphire at her throat, his fingers brushing against her skin with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything she knew about him. "This was my mother's. I want you to wear it tonight." Lena's hand flew to the necklace. "Adrian, I can't. What if something happens to it?" "Then I'll buy you another one." His eyes held hers. "It's a symbol, Lena. My mother was the only woman my father ever truly loved. Giving you her necklace tells everyone watching that I'm serious about you. Even though we're not. Even though," he stepped back, offering his arm, "ready to convince the world otherwise?" The Metropolitan Museum had been transformed for the gala into something that existed between dream and reality. Every gallery glowed with carefully placed lighting that made the artwork seem alive, and the main atrium had been converted into a ballroom filled with the kind of people who shaped the world from boardrooms and backroom deals. Orchestra music drifted through the space, elegant and understated, the perfect soundtrack for conversations that determine political futures and billion-dollar mergers. Adrian's arrival caused exactly the stir Lena had been dreading. Heads turned, conversations paused, and she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her worth. Marcus and 2 other security personnel materialized from somewhere behind them, forming a discreet perimeter that managed to be protective without being obvious. "Smile," Adrian murmured against her ear, his hand settling at the small of her back. "You're supposed to be enjoying yourself." "I am enjoying myself," Lena lied. "Can't you tell by how my hands are shaking?" "I can. Which is why I'm going to keep touching you until your body remembers we've done this 1,000 times." His thumb traced small circles against her spine, the gesture intimate enough to sell the performance. "Breathe, Lena. They're just people. People who could destroy me with a phone call. People who are terrified of me," Adrian corrected. "Which means they're terrified of you by extension. Use it." They moved through the crowd with Adrian leading, stopping periodically to exchange greetings with people whose faces Lena recognized from news broadcasts and magazine covers. Each introduction followed the same pattern. Adrian's arm possessive around her waist, her left hand displayed with its obscene diamond, smiles that didn't quite reach anyone's eyes. "Adrian, darling!" A woman in red descended on them, all air kisses and calculating eyes. "And this must be your mysterious fiancée, Catherine Blackwell," she said to Lena. "I chair the museum's acquisitions committee." "Lena Rivera," Lena replied, accepting the woman's extended hand. "The exhibit is stunning, isn't it? We've been planning this for months, though I must say, your engagement has rather stolen our thunder." Catherine's laugh was light, but her eyes were sharp. "No one can talk about anything else. How did you two meet?" Lena opened her mouth to recite the carefully crafted story, but Adrian spoke first. "At an auction, actually. Lena was representing a client interested in a Modigliani, and I was determined to acquire it for my collection. We ended up in a bidding war." "Who won?" Catherine asked. "I did," Adrian said smoothly, "but Lena was so impressive in defeat that I asked her to dinner. Best decision I ever made." It was a new detail, not part of Victoria's script, and Lena scrambled to follow his lead. He was insufferably smug about winning. "I was confident," Adrian corrected. "Smug. Confident enough to convince you to give me a chance despite your initial resistance." The back and forth felt almost natural, and Catherine's expression shifted from skepticism to something approaching acceptance. "Well, it sounds like quite the romance. I hope you'll both attend our fall fundraiser. We could use someone with your eye for art, Lena." They extricated themselves from Catherine's orbit, only to be caught by a politician whose name Lena recognized from attack ads, then a tech CEO who seemed fascinated by Adrian's investment portfolio, then a socialite who wanted to discuss wedding plans with an enthusiasm that felt predatory. Through it all, Adrian maintained constant contact, his hand at her waist, his fingers laced through hers, his body angled toward her in a way that broadcast possession and protection. Lena found herself leaning into his touch, not because the performance required it, but because the alternative was drowning in the suffocating attention of people who wanted to dissect every aspect of her existence. "You're doing well," Adrian said during a brief moment of privacy as they stood before a Caravaggio that depicted some violent biblical scene. "Better than I expected." "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's an observation. You're holding your own against people who've spent decades perfecting the art of social warfare." His hand tightened on her waist. "But we're not done yet. Victor just arrived with Elena." Lena followed his gaze to the entrance where the Petrovs had indeed appeared. Elena in a gold gown that screamed for attention, Victor in a tuxedo that whispered power. They scanned the crowd with predatory efficiency, and when Victor's eyes found Adrian, his smile was all teeth. "Here we go," Adrian murmured. "Remember, you're not afraid of them. You're exactly where you belong." The Petrovs made their way across the ballroom with the confidence of people accustomed to others moving out of their path. Victor's smile never wavered, but his eyes catalogued every detail of Lena's appearance with uncomfortable intensity. "Adrian, Lena," Victor greeted them warmly. "What a pleasure to see you both again so soon. That dress is exquisite, my dear." "Italian?" "French," Lena replied, though she had no idea. "A gift from Adrian." "How generous. Elena, doesn't Lena look lovely?" Elena's smile could have frozen fire. "Absolutely radiant, though I'm surprised to see you wearing the Volkov sapphire. That's quite a significant piece." "It belonged to Adrian's mother," Lena said, her hand moving unconsciously to the stone at her throat. "He thought I should wear it tonight." The implication hung in the air. This wasn't just any jewelry, but a family heirloom, the kind of thing given to a woman who mattered. Elena's eyes flashed with something ugly before she smoothed her expression back to neutral. "How sentimental," Elena said. "Adrian, I didn't realize you were the sentimental type." "I'm full of surprises," Adrian replied, "as I'm sure you've discovered." "Indeed." Victor's attention shifted to someone across the room. "If you'll excuse us, there's the senator. Elena, come." But Elena lingered, her eyes fixed on Lena with calculation that made the hair on the back of Lena's neck stand up. "Would you mind if I borrowed your fiancé for a moment, Adrian?" Girl talk. I mind very much, Adrian said flatly. Oh, come now. Surely you trust me not to corrupt her in the middle of a gala. Elena's smile widened. Or is she too fragile to handle a simple conversation? It was a trap, and they both knew it. If Adrian refused, it would suggest Lena needed his protection for even basic social interaction. If he agreed, Elena would have the opportunity to probe for weaknesses without Adrian present to deflect. Lena made the decision before Adrian could respond. I'd love to chat, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. There's a Renoir in the next gallery I've been wanting to see. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he released his hold on her waist. 10 minutes. Of course, Elena purred. I just want to get to know the woman who captured the city's most eligible bachelor. They walked together toward the Impressionist gallery, Elena's heels clicking against marble with military precision. Marcus followed at a discreet distance, close enough to intervene but far enough to maintain the illusion of privacy. The Renoir Elena had mentioned depicted a garden party, all dappled sunlight and beautiful people pretending their lives were perfect. Lovely, isn't it? Elena said, studying the painting, all that beauty hiding the rot underneath. Renoir knew how to make decay look appealing. Is there a point to this? Lena asked. Direct. I appreciate that. Elena turned to face her fully. Let me be equally direct. I know Adrian didn't propose to you 3 weeks ago. I know you weren't together for 6 months. I know this entire engagement is a performance designed to humiliate my family and reject the alliance my father offered. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Elena stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The question is, what are you getting out of this arrangement? Money? Protection? Revenge against someone who wronged you? I'm getting Adrian, Lena said. That seems to be more than you managed. Elena's hand moved so fast Lena barely saw it coming. A sharp slap that cracked across her cheek with enough force to make her head snap to the side. Pain bloomed hot and immediate, and Lena tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. Marcus was there in an instant, his hand on Elena's wrist with bruising force. Touch her again, and it will be the last thing you do. How dramatic, Elena said, though she'd gone pale. I barely touched her. You assaulted her, Marcus replied, his voice flat and deadly. Mr. Volkov will hear about this. I'm sure he will, along with the entire room who just watched her stumble into that column. Elena pulled her wrist free, her smile vicious. So clumsy of you, Lena. Those heels must be difficult to walk in. She swept away, leaving Lena with Marcus and the burning ache in her cheek. The security guard's expression was thunderous as he examined the rapidly forming bruise. We need to get you out of here, he said. No. Lena straightened her spine, ignoring the way the room tilted slightly. If I leave now, she wins. Everyone will think I'm too weak to handle this world. Mr. Volkov will understand. Lena hoped that was true. Take me back to him. Now. The walk back across the ballroom felt like miles. Lena was acutely aware of eyes tracking her movement, of whispers that spread like wildfire, of the spectacle Elena had created by attacking her in public. By the time they reached Adrian, he'd already heard. His expression was carved from ice, his entire body radiating the kind of fury that made smart people run. What happened? His voice was deadly calm, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. Elena happened, Lena said. She wanted to send a message. Adrian's hand came up to cup her injured cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone capable of such violence. Marcus? She slapped Miss Rivera, hard. I intervened immediately. And Elena's claim? That Miss Rivera stumbled into a column. No witnesses will corroborate that story. Adrian's eyes had gone black with rage. Get the car. We're leaving. No, Lena said again, more firmly this time. That's what Elena wants. She wants to drive me away, prove I don't belong, make you look weak for choosing me. I won't give her that satisfaction. Lena, everyone is watching, Adrian. If I run now, I'm finished. We're finished. She met his eyes, trying to convey the determination she barely felt. So we stay. We dance. We show them that Elena Petrov can't break me with a cheap shot. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing, his thumb tracing carefully around the edges of her bruise. Then something shifted in his expression, approval mixing with the fury, respect cutting through the rage. "You're sure?" he asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." A dangerous smile curved Adrian's lips. "Then let's make sure everyone remembers tonight." He led her to the center of the ballroom as the orchestra began a new piece, something slow and dramatic that seemed designed for the moment. Adrian pulled Lena into his arms with the same possessive certainty he'd shown at the wedding, and suddenly they were dancing while hundreds of people watched. "This is insane," Lena whispered. "Absolutely," Adrian agreed, "but effective. Look at them." Lena glanced around and saw exactly what he meant. The crowd was riveted, their attention fixed on the couple at the center of the floor. Elena stood at the edge with her father, fury and shock warring across her features. She'd expected Lena to crumble, to retreat, to prove she didn't belong in this world. Instead, Lena was dancing with Adrian Volkov like she owned the room. "You're bleeding," Adrian said quietly, his thumb brushing the corner of her mouth where her teeth had cut. "Elena hit you hard." "I've had worse." "When?" Lena hesitated, then decided honesty was safer than evasion. "Middle school. There was a girl who didn't like that I got better grades than her daughter. She cornered me after class and made her opinions known." "What happened to her?" "I reported her to the principal. She got suspended." Lena met his eyes. "I learned early that some people hate you for succeeding when they expect you to fail. And Elena hates you for succeeding where she failed," Adrian said. "Good. Hatred means you matter." The music swelled, and Adrian spun her with controlled force that made the room blur. When he pulled her back, his mouth was inches from her ear. "I'm going to destroy her for this," he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Not tonight, not in public, but I will make her pay for touching you." "Why?" The question escaped before Lena could stop it. "This is just business, remember? I'm just playing a role." Adrian pulled back enough to meet her eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Fury, yes, but also something else, something protective and possessive that went beyond strategic calculation. "Because you're mine," he said simply, "and I protect what's mine." It shouldn't have sent heat flooding through her chest. This was still a performance, still temporary, still built on lies and strategy. But standing in Adrian's arms, with her cheek throbbing and her heart racing, Lena felt something shift between them, something dangerous and real and absolutely terrifying. The song ended. Adrian kept her close for a beat longer than necessary, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that felt like a question she didn't know how to answer. Then he stepped back, his expression smoothing back into neutral control. "We should make an appearance in the other galleries," he said. "Show everyone you're unfazed." They spent the next hour navigating the museum's exhibits with Adrian's hand a constant presence at her back or waist. Lena smiled until her face ached, engaged in small talk about art and culture, pretended the bruise on her cheek was a minor inconvenience rather than a visible reminder of how dangerous this world had become. But beneath the performance, her mind raced. Elena had attacked her publicly, which meant the stakes had escalated beyond social maneuvering into actual violence. If Elena was willing to strike her at a gala surrounded by witnesses, what would she do in private? What would Victor do once he decided Lena was an obstacle worth removing permanently? Around midnight, Adrian's phone buzzed with a text that made his expression harden. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "Tell you in the car." He guided her toward the exit with Marcus and the security team forming a tight corridor around them. The SUV was already waiting, engine running, back door open. They'd barely cleared the museum steps when Adrian's phone rang. He answered, his voice clipped. "Talk to me." Lena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Adrian's expression go from hard to murderous. "When?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "Keep her there. I'm on my way." He ended the call and turned to Lena with eyes that had gone completely cold. "Elena didn't just slap you tonight. She also had her people grab your friend Sarah from her apartment 3 hours ago." The bottom dropped out of Lena's stomach. "What?" "Sarah called in a panic to a number she found in your old apartment, the emergency line we set up in case anyone tried to contact you. Elena's people took her somewhere in the warehouse district." Adrian's jaw clenched. "She's being held as leverage. Elena wants to negotiate the terms of our breakup. We have to get her, Lena said immediately. Adrian, Sarah has nothing to do with this, which is exactly why Elena chose her. She's looking for your weakness, and she found it. Adrian leaned forward to the driver. Warehouse District. Marcus, assemble the team. Full tactical gear. Adrian, please, Lena grabbed his arm, desperation making her bold. Sarah is innocent. She's just my friend who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. I know. His hand covered hers, surprisingly gentle, which is why we're going to get her back. But Lena, you need to understand something. The moment we move against Elena like this, it's war. Victor will respond, other families will choose sides, and people will die. Are you prepared for that? Lena thought about Sarah, loyal, protective Sarah who'd warned her to run, who'd tried to save her from this exact situation. Sarah, who was probably terrified and alone in some warehouse because Lena had chosen power over safety. Yes, Lena said, whatever it takes. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then hold on. This is about to get very dangerous very quickly. The warehouse district was a maze of abandoned buildings and rusted shipping containers, the kind of place where bad things happened and no one asked questions. Adrian's SUV was followed by 2 more vehicles full of his security personnel, all of them armed and moving with military precision. Stay in the car, Adrian ordered as they pulled up to a warehouse with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Marcus will stay with you. If anything goes wrong, I'm coming with you, Lena interrupted. Absolutely not. She's my friend. My responsibility. Lena met his eyes. And if you're doing this for me, then I need to be there. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression must have convinced him. Fine, but you stay behind me at all times, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They approached the warehouse with Adrian's team spreading out to cover all exits. The main door was unlocked, hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, the space was cavernous and dark, lit only by moonlight filtering through broken skylights and the flashlights Adrian's men carried. Sarah? Lena called out, her voice echoing off concrete walls. Lena! Sarah's voice came from somewhere deeper in the warehouse, terrified and relieved. Lena, don't! It's a trap! Lights flooded the space, temporarily blinding them. When Lena's vision cleared, she saw Sarah tied to a chair in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by at least a dozen armed men, and standing behind her friend with a gun pressed to her head was Elena Petrov. Predictable, Elena said, smiling. I knew threatening the friend would bring you running. Adrian, did you really think I'd negotiate without insurance? Let her go, Adrian said, his voice flat and deadly. This is between us, Elena. She has nothing to do with it. Of course she does. She's Lena's weakness, which makes her valuable. Elena's finger moved to the trigger. Here's my offer. You end this fake engagement tonight publicly. Tell everyone it was a mistake, that you realized Lena wasn't suitable. Do that, and your little friend goes home unharmed. And if I refuse, Adrian asked, then Sarah dies and Lena gets to live with the knowledge that her friend's death is her fault. Elena's eyes glittered with malice. Choose quickly. My trigger finger gets twitchy when I'm bored. Lena's mind raced. This was exactly what Elena wanted. Force them to either sacrifice the engagement or sacrifice Sarah, proving one way or another that the relationship was a sham. Either choice would destroy the carefully constructed fiction they'd built, unless there was a third option. Let me make you a counteroffer, Lena said, stepping forward before Adrian could stop her. You let Sarah go unharmed, and I'll tell you the truth about Adrian and me. The whole truth, no lies, no performance. Isn't that what you really want? Proof that you were right? Lena, don't, Adrian started. The truth? Elena's expression sharpened with interest. You'd confess that this engagement is fake? I'll confess whatever truths I know, Lena replied carefully. But first, Sarah goes free. You can keep me instead. Even better, Elena gestured to one of her men. Untie the friend. Lena, no, Sarah said, struggling against the ropes. Don't do this for me. It's already done. Lena kept her eyes on Elena as Sarah was cut free and pushed toward Adrian's men. She leaves. Now. Adrian's hand gripped Lena's arm hard enough to bruise. What are you doing? Trusting you to know the difference between truth and lies, Lena said quietly. Then louder, to Elena. Sarah leaves, and I'll tell you everything you want to know. Elena considered this, then nodded. Get her out of here, but Lena stays. Marcus moved to escort Sarah out, but the younger woman fought him, reaching for Lena with desperation. Please, don't go, Lena said firmly. You'll be safe. That's all that matters. As Sarah was half carried out of the warehouse, her protests echoing long after she disappeared, Lena stood alone in the center of the space, surrounded by Elena's men, acutely aware that Adrian's security was outnumbered and that her next words would determine whether anyone walked out of here alive. So, Elena said, lowering the gun, but keeping it ready. The truth. Was the engagement real or fake? Lena met her eyes without flinching. When Adrian asked me to pretend to be his fiancée at that wedding, it was absolutely strategic. A calculated move to reject your family's alliance and establish his independence. Elena's smile turned triumphant. I knew it. But, Lena continued, something neither of us anticipated happened. Somewhere between the performance and the reality, between the lies we told the world and the truths we told each other, it became real. Not the timeline, not the story about how we met. That's all fiction. But this? She looked at Adrian, who stood frozen, his expression unreadable. What I feel for him, what I think he feels for me, that's the most honest thing in my entire fabricated story. The words hung in the air, true and terrifying, because Lena realized as she said them that they weren't just part of some clever misdirection. They were real. Somewhere in the past 48 hours of chaos and danger and performance, she'd stopped pretending to care about Adrian Volkov and started actually caring. It was insane and reckless and absolutely genuine. Elena's expression flickered with uncertainty. You expect me to believe? I don't care what you believe, Lena interrupted. You wanted the truth. That's the truth. The engagement started as strategy. It's become something else, something neither of us planned for and neither of us quite knows how to handle. Adrian moved then, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. His hands framed her face with a gentleness that seemed impossible given the circumstances, his thumb tracing carefully around her bruised cheek. Is that true? He asked quietly, as though they were alone instead of surrounded by armed hostiles. You stopped pretending? Yes, Lena whispered. Somewhere around the time you gave me your mother's necklace and looked at me like I mattered for reasons beyond strategy. You do matter. The words were raw, unguarded, nothing like the calculated responses he'd been delivering for days. You matter in ways I didn't anticipate and don't entirely understand. Then he kissed her, and the warehouse disappeared. There was only the heat of his mouth against hers, the careful way his hands cradled her face like she was something precious, the thundering of her heart that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with falling for a man who was supposed to be temporary. When they broke apart, Elena was staring at them with an expression that cycled between rage and confusion and grudging acceptance. That, she started, then stopped. That wasn't performance. No, Adrian agreed, his arm sliding around Lena's waist with now familiar possessiveness. It wasn't. So here's what's going to happen, Elena. You're going to leave. You're going to tell your father that this engagement is real enough that pursuing it further is a waste of resources. And you're never going to threaten anyone I care about again. Or what? Elena demanded. Or I stop playing by civilized rules. Adrian's voice dropped to something that barely qualified as human. I've built my empire on knowing where every line is and how far I can push before crossing it. But for her? He pulled Lena closer. I'll cross every line, burn every bridge, destroy anyone who tries to hurt what's mine, including you. The promise was delivered with such absolute conviction that even Elena's armed guards shifted uncomfortably. This was Adrian Volkov unleashed, and it was terrifying. Elena studied them both for a long moment, calculation warring with self-preservation. Finally, she lowered her gun completely. Fine, she bit out. Keep your little romance. But this isn't over, Adrian. Your father is a pragmatist. He'll recognize when a battle is lost and redirect his energy elsewhere. Adrian's expression didn't soften. Now get out before I change my mind about letting you leave intact. Elena and her men retreated, leaving Adrian and Lena standing in the center of the warehouse with his security team surrounding them. The moment the last of Elena's people disappeared, Lena's knees went weak. Adrian caught her before she could fall, his arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness. "I've got you." "Is it over?" Lena asked against his chest. "The immediate crisis, yes. The larger complications?" His hand moved up to cradle the back of her head. "Those are just beginning." Marcus appeared at Adrian's elbow, his expression grim. "Sir, we should move. Elena might regroup with reinforcements." "Agreed." Adrian didn't release Lena as they walked back to the SUV, didn't let go as they climbed inside, didn't stop touching her during the entire ride back to the penthouse. It was as though the performance had finally cracked, revealing something raw and real underneath. "Was that true?" Adrian asked finally, breaking the silence. "What you said in the warehouse." Lena didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes, I didn't plan for it. I definitely didn't want it. But somewhere between playing your fiancé and actually being close to you, the line blurred. That's dangerous." "I know. Our arrangement was supposed to be temporary, clean, business." "I know that too." Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "I don't do relationships, Lena. I don't do vulnerability or emotional entanglement or any of the things that create weakness enemies can exploit." "Then we have a problem," Lena said softly. "We do." He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent heat flooding through her entire body. "Because I don't think I can pretend anymore either." The admission hung between them during the ride back to the penthouse, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to fully explore. Lena stared out the window at the city lights blurring past, acutely aware of Adrian's thumb still tracing absent patterns on her palm, of the warmth of his body beside hers, of the way everything had shifted in that warehouse when performance became truth. They didn't speak again until they were behind the locked door of Adrian's penthouse, the security team positioned outside, the world temporarily held at bay. Lena stood in the center of the living room, still wearing the midnight blue dress and her mother's sapphire, feeling like she existed between two versions of herself. The invisible girl from 3 days ago, and whoever she was becoming in Adrian's orbit. "Let me see your cheek," Adrian said, guiding her toward the kitchen with a hand at her elbow. He retrieved an ice pack from the freezer and pressed it gently against the bruise Elena had left. The cold was shocking against her overheated skin, but Lena leaned into it, into him, too tired to maintain the careful distance they'd been pretending existed. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Everything hurts," Lena admitted, "but not the way you mean." Adrian's free hand came up to cup her uninjured cheek, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made breathing difficult. "What happened tonight changes things." "I know." Victor will have heard about the warehouse by now, about Elena's failure to leverage Sarah into ending our engagement, about what you said. His thumb brushed across her lower lip with dangerous gentleness. "About what I said." "Regrets?" Lena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. "Several thousand, none of them about you." Adrian stepped back, creating space that felt like loss. "But we need to talk about what happens next. The stakes just escalated beyond social maneuvering into actual warfare. Victor won't let this stand. He can't afford to look weak, which means he'll move against us with everything he has." "Us," Lena repeated. "You keep saying us like we're actually a team instead of business partners with complicated feelings. Aren't we both?" Adrian moved to the windows overlooking the city, his posture radiating tension. "The engagement started as strategy. But what happened in that warehouse? What I felt when Elena had a gun to your friend's head, when I realized you were willing to trade yourself. That wasn't strategic. That was something I haven't allowed myself to feel in years." "What was it?" "Fear." The admission seemed to cost him something. "I don't get afraid, Lena. I calculate risk and mitigate threats and move through the world with absolute control. But when I thought Elena might hurt you, when I saw you offer yourself up like some kind of sacrifice, I was terrified." Lena crossed the space between them, drawn by the rawness in his voice. "I was terrified too. But not of Elena." "Then what?" "Of this. Of you. Of the fact that somewhere in the middle of all the lies and performance, I started caring whether you lived or died." She placed her hand on his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath the expensive fabric of his tuxedo. That wasn't part of the plan. No, Adrian agreed, his hand covering hers. It definitely wasn't. They stood like that for a long moment, the city glittering beneath them, the weight of what they'd confessed settling into something neither quite knew how to handle. Then Adrian's phone shattered the moment with an insistent buzz. He checked the screen and his expression hardened. Victor, he wants to meet. Tomorrow morning, neutral location. To negotiate? To threaten. Adrian typed a quick response. He'll make it sound like an offer, some way to resolve this conflict peacefully. But what he really wants is to demonstrate that he still has power, that tonight's failure was a minor setback rather than a defeat. So we refuse? No. We go. We show him that nothing he does will break us apart. Adrian's eyes met hers. But Lena, after tonight, after what happened in that warehouse, I need to know you understand what you're choosing. This isn't a 6-month arrangement anymore. This is real, which means the danger is real, the violence is real, and the possibility that one or both of us doesn't survive is very real. I understand. Do you? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to invisible and safe. You'll be Adrian Volkov's actual partner, not just his temporary fiancé. Every enemy I have becomes your enemy. Every decision I make affects your life. Every risk I take is a risk we both bear. Lena thought about her tiny apartment, her forgettable job, her careful existence at the edges of other people's lives. Then she thought about the past 3 days, the terror and exhilaration, the way Adrian looked at her like she mattered, the feeling of being visible for the first time in her adult life. I'm choosing this, she said firmly. I'm choosing you, not the arrangement, not the performance, you. Whatever that means, whatever it costs. Adrian's control cracked. He pulled her against him with enough force to steal her breath, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with hunger and desperation and feelings neither of them had intended. Lena kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his tuxedo jacket, her body pressed against his like she could somehow merge them into one entity that was stronger than either half alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst one I've ever had, Lena agreed. We're going to make each other's lives incredibly complicated. I'm counting on it. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped Adrian's throat. You're insane. I learned from the best. Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. So what happens now? Now we prepare for war. Adrian's expression hardened back into the calculating mask she'd first seen at the wedding. Victor will make his move soon. We need to be ready. The meeting with Victor was set for 9 the next morning at a restaurant that served as neutral ground for the city's various power brokers. Adrian insisted Lena wear something that projected confidence without aggression, a cream-colored suit that Victoria had sent over along with a note that simply read, "Armor up." Marcus drove them with 2 additional security vehicles forming a convoy, a visible reminder that Adrian Volkov traveled with protection. The restaurant was already half full when they arrived, but the private room Victor had reserved was empty except for the man himself, seated at a table with a view of the city and an expression that suggested pleasant conversation rather than the threat of violence. Adrian, Lena, Victor greeted them with the same warm smile that hadn't reached his eyes at the museum. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice. Let's skip the pleasantries, Adrian said, pulling out a chair for Lena before taking his own. What do you want, Victor? Peace, resolution, a way for us all to move forward without further bloodshed. Victor poured coffee from a silver pot, the domesticity of the gesture at odds with the tension crackling through the air. Last night was regrettable. Elena acted without my approval, and I've made my displeasure clear. Your daughter kidnapped an innocent woman and held a gun to her head, Lena said flatly. Regrettable seems like an understatement. Indeed, and I've taken steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. Victor's eyes fixed on Lena with uncomfortable intensity. You impressed me last night, the way you offered yourself in exchange for your friend. That took courage. Or stupidity. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? It does if you're planning to survive in this world. Victor took a sip of his coffee. Adrian has made his choice clear. He wants you as his partner, not Elena. I can accept that. What I can't accept is the humiliation my family suffered when you announced your engagement at that wedding. Then you should have raised a daughter who doesn't assume she's entitled to other people's lives, Adrian replied coldly. Perhaps, but intention and result are two different things. Elena was humiliated publicly. That humiliation reflects on me, on my organization, on every alliance I've built over decades. Victor set down his cup with deliberate precision. So here's what I propose. You make a public gesture that acknowledges the insult. An apology, perhaps, or a donation to one of Elena's favorite charities in her name. Something that allows my daughter to save face. No, Adrian said immediately. Be reasonable. I don't apologize for choosing who I want in my life, and I definitely don't apologize to make your daughter feel better about not getting her way. Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous. If Elena wanted to be my wife, she should have been worth choosing. She wasn't. Victor's pleasant facade cracked, revealing the predator underneath. You're making a mistake, Adrian. I've been patient because we have history, because our organizations have cooperated in the past. But my patience has limits. So does mine, Adrian replied. And you reached them when your daughter put a gun to an innocent woman's head. Sarah wasn't innocent. She was leverage. There's a difference. Victor's attention shifted to Lena. Tell me, my dear, are you prepared for what comes next? When Adrian's enemies realize he has an actual weakness now, not just a strategic fiancé. When they come for you with everything they have. Let them come, Lena said, surprised by her own conviction. I'm not going anywhere. Brave words. We'll see if you still mean them when the bodies start piling up. Victor stood, buttoning his jacket. I came here to offer peace. You've rejected it. What happens next is on you. What happens next, Adrian said, standing as well, is that you leave my fiancée and everyone she cares about alone. You redirect your ambitions elsewhere. And you remember that I've built my empire on being 3 steps ahead of people who thought they could threaten me. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Adrian's hand settled on Lena's shoulder, protective and possessive. Touch her again. Threaten her again. Come anywhere near anyone she loves. And I'll dismantle everything you've built piece by piece. Your shipping routes, your political connections, your carefully cultivated reputation. All of it. Gone. Victor's expression went cold. You can try. I won't have to try. I'll succeed. Because unlike you, I don't make threats I can't execute. The two men stared at each other across the table, decades of carefully maintained professional courtesy dissolving into open hostility. Then Victor smiled, a terrible expression that promised retribution. I look forward to seeing you try, he said. Then he walked out, leaving Adrian and Lena alone with the certainty that they'd just declared war on one of the most dangerous men in the city. That went well, Lena said into the silence. About as well as expected. Adrian helped her to her feet. We need to move quickly now. Victor will strike within 48 hours, probably sooner. He'll want to demonstrate strength before word spreads that I rejected his offer. What kind of strike? Could be anything. An attack on one of my warehouses? Interference with a shipment? Maybe something more direct. Adrian's jaw clenched. Or he might come for you again, try to prove I can't protect you. So what do? We make sure you're somewhere he can't reach. Adrian pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I have a safe house upstate, completely secure, off the grid, unknown to anyone outside my innermost circle. You'll stay there until this is resolved. Absolutely not. Adrian looked up from his phone. Lena, no, I'm not hiding while you fight a war I helped start. We're partners, remember? That means I'm staying by your side, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous. This isn't a debate. You're right, it's not. Because I've already made my decision. Lena crossed her arms. You told me last night that I'm your actual partner now, not just your strategic asset. Partners don't abandon each other when things get difficult. Partners also don't demand to be kept in the line of fire when there's a safer alternative. Then maybe I'm not the kind of partner who needs to be kept safe. Maybe I'm the kind who fights beside you. Lena stepped closer, looking up at him with all the determination she possessed. "You said I impressed you when I offered myself in exchange for Sarah, that I showed courage. Well, I'm showing it again now. I'm not running." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring across his features. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. A real smile, not the calculated one he used for public consumption, but something genuine and slightly awed. "You're going to be the death of me," he said. "Probably. But at least you won't be bored." "No, with you, boring is definitely off the table." Adrian's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted to something Lena couldn't read. "It's Marcus. Something's wrong." He answered, and Lena watched his face harden with each word he heard. When he ended the call, his eyes were black with fury. "What happened?" she asked. "Victor didn't wait 48 hours. He didn't even wait 4. One of my shipments was intercepted 20 minutes ago. 3 of my people are dead, and the cargo is gone. 30 million in pharmaceuticals that were supposed to go to a buyer in Miami." Lena's stomach dropped. "He killed them?" "Victor doesn't get his hands dirty. He hired contractors to do it." Adrian's hand clenched around his phone hard enough that Lena heard the case crack. But the order came from him. This is his opening move. "What's your response?" Adrian looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. This wasn't the controlled businessman who'd approached her at a wedding. This was something else entirely, something primal and dangerous that she suspected most people never saw and lived to tell about. "I'm going to show Viktor Petrov why people fear me," he said quietly, "and you're going to help me do it." "How?" "Viktor's power comes from 3 sources: his shipping operation, his political connections, and his reputation for being untouchable. We're going to destroy all 3 simultaneously." Adrian moved to the windows, already planning. "His next major shipment leaves the port tonight at midnight. We're going to intercept it, take the cargo, and make sure everyone knows who is responsible. That's a declaration of open war. We're already at war. Victor fired the first shot when he killed my people. This is just making it official." "What do you need me to do?" Lena asked. Adrian turned to face her fully. "I need you to be visible. While I'm hitting his shipment, you're going to attend a charity event at the Ritz where half the city's power players will be in attendance. You're going to smile and socialize and make sure everyone sees that you're not afraid, that you're not hiding, that you're exactly where you belong, at my side even when I'm not physically present. You want me to be bait. I want you to be a message, that we're not intimidated, not backing down, not vulnerable to his threats." Adrian moved closer, his hands framing her face. "But yes, there's an element of risk. Victor might try something at the event. That's why you'll have a full security detail, and Marcus will be with you personally." "While you're doing what exactly?" "Leading the team that intercepts his shipment. It needs to be precise, clean, and unmistakably my operation. Victor needs to know I didn't just defend. I struck back harder than he hit me." Lena processed this, her mind racing through the implications. Adrian was asking her to be the public face of their partnership while he engaged in what amounted to organized crime, to stand in a ballroom full of the city's elite while he committed what could technically be called piracy, to trust that his security could keep her safe while he was miles away doing something that could get him killed. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I'll go to the charity event. I'll be your message. I'll show everyone that we're not afraid." Lena met his eyes. "But Adrian, you come back. Whatever you have to do tonight, however dangerous it gets, you come back to me." Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. "I always come back. Promise me." "Lena, promise me," she repeated more forcefully. "Because I just chose this. I chose you, and I'm not interested in being a widow before I'm even actually a wife." Adrian pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her with crushing force. "I promise. I'll come back." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the middle of the private room while the city sprawled beneath them and war loomed on the horizon. Then Adrian's phone buzzed again. Marcus, coordinating the night's operations, and the moment shattered into logistics and strategy and preparation for what came next. The hours before the charity event passed in a blur of briefings and wardrobe changes and security protocols. Victoria appeared with another stunning gown. this one black and severe, armored in elegance. Marcus walked Lena through exit routes and panic signals and worst-case scenarios with the kind of clinical precision that should have been terrifying but was somehow reassuring. Adrian disappeared into his office for most of the afternoon, coordinating with his people, planning the intercept with military precision. Lena caught glimpses of him through the open door, on the phone speaking rapid Russian, studying shipping manifests, checking weapons with the casual familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. It should have frightened her, seeing this side of him. The criminal, the violent enforcer, the man who commanded loyalty through fear and capability in equal measure. Instead, Lena found herself oddly calm. This was who Adrian Volkov actually was beneath the expensive suits and calculated charm. Someone who built empires in shadows and protected what was his with ruthless efficiency. And somehow, impossibly, she'd become part of what was his. By 7 that evening, Lena stood in front of the mirror in a dress that cost more than her previous year's salary, diamonds at her throat and wrists that represented wealth she couldn't quite comprehend, makeup applied by professionals who understood the art of making someone look powerful rather than merely pretty. "Perfect," Victoria said, assessing her work. "You look like someone who belongs in Adrian's world, someone dangerous in your own right." I don't feel dangerous," Lena admitted. "Then fake it. That's half the battle in this life, projecting confidence until it becomes real." Victoria's expression softened fractionally. "He chose well, you know. Adrian, most women would have run by now. The fact that you're still here, still fighting, that says something." "What does it say?" "That maybe he finally found someone worth the complications." Victoria gathered her supplies. "Marcus will be here in 20 minutes. Remember, you're not afraid, you're not hiding, and you're exactly where you belong. Make them believe it." Adrian appeared as Victoria left, dressed in all-black tactical gear that transformed him from businessman to something out of a military operation. He stopped when he saw Lena, his eyes tracking over her with an intensity that made heat flood her chest. "You look," he started. "If you say acceptable again, I'm taking off these ridiculous heels and hitting you with them," Lena warned. A genuine smile curved his lips. "I was going to say devastating. In the literal sense, you're going to devastate every person at that event. Flattery doesn't suit you." "It's not flattery. It's tactical assessment." He crossed to her, his hand settling at her waist with familiar possessiveness. "You're my message tonight, remember? And the message is that I chose someone extraordinary. Even though you originally chose me because I was convenient and available, I chose you because you were brave enough to say yes when every instinct should have told you to run. Everything after that has been you proving I made the right choice." His thumb brushed across her lower lip. "Be safe tonight. Trust Marcus. And if anything feels wrong, I know. Get out, signal for extraction. Don't try to be a hero." Lena placed her hand over his heart. "You be safe too. I meant what I said earlier. You come back to me." "I will." Adrian leaned down to kiss her, and for a moment the tactical gear and evening gown and looming violence all disappeared. There was only this, the heat of his mouth, the certainty of his arms around her, the terrifying knowledge that what had started as performance had become something neither of them could control. When they broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over, when Victor is handled and we're not dodging assassination attempts, we need to talk about what this actually is. This being? Us. Whatever we've become." His hand cradled the back of her head. "Because I don't think either of us planned for real, Lena. But that's what this is. Messy and complicated and probably doomed, but real." "I know," Lena whispered. "I've known since the warehouse. Maybe before. Then we'll figure it out. Together." Adrian stepped back, his expression shifting back into the cold calculation required for what came next. "Marcus is waiting. Go be magnificent." The charity event was exactly the kind of affair Lena would have avoided in her previous life. A ballroom full of the city's wealthiest and most powerful, all of them dressed in designer labels and false smiles. But she wasn't the invisible girl in a cheap dress anymore. She was Adrian Volkov's fiancée, arriving with a security detail that parted crowds, wearing diamonds that caught every light, projecting the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was and refusing to apologize for it. Marcus stayed close, but not obtrusively so, always within her line of sight, but allowing her space to navigate the social waters on her own. People approached with the same calculated interest she'd encountered at the museum gala. Politicians wanting to curry favor with Adrian through her, businessmen hoping for introductions, society women trying to determine if she was threat or ally. Lena handled each interaction with the poise Victoria had drilled into her, deflecting probing questions with practiced ease, projecting warmth without revealing anything of substance. She was Adrian's partner, his choice, his equal. And if some of that was still performance, well, she was learning that the best lies were built on foundations of truth. She was 2 hours into the event, beginning to think the night would pass without incident, when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against every instinct screaming at her to ignore it, Lena glanced at the screen. The message was simple. Roof. Now. Come alone, or people die. Lena's blood ran cold. This was exactly what Adrian had warned about. Victor making a move when she was separated from Adrian's direct protection. The smart thing would be to show the text to Marcus, to follow protocol, to trust the security Adrian had arranged. But the message had said people die if she didn't come alone. And Lena had already learned that Viktor Petrov didn't make empty threats. She made a decision that was either incredibly brave or catastrophically stupid. Slipping away from the ballroom during a moment when Marcus was scanning the crowd, Lena found the service stairs and climbed toward the roof access. Each step echoed in the concrete stairwell. Each floor she passed another chance to turn back, to choose safety over whatever waited above. The roof access door was unlocked. Lena pushed through into cold night air and city lights and found Elena Petrov waiting with 2 armed men flanking her. "There you are," Elena said, her smile vicious. "I was beginning to think you were smarter than you looked." "What do you want?" Lena demanded, acutely aware that she was outnumbered, outgunned, and completely alone. "The same thing I've always wanted. For you to disappear so I can have what should have been mine." Elena pulled a gun from her clutch with practiced ease. "My father is too cautious. He wants to break Adrian through business, through strategy, through all the civilized ways men like them wage war. But I know better. The fastest way to destroy Adrian Volkov is to take away what he loves." "He doesn't love me. This is still just strategy. Don't insult my intelligence. I saw you two at the museum. I heard what you said in that warehouse. This stopped being strategy the moment you chose to care about each other." Elena's finger moved to the trigger. "So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to jump off this roof. Tragic suicide. Fiancé couldn't handle the pressure of Adrian's world. My men will make sure it looks convincing. Adrian will know you did this. Maybe. Probably. But by the time he figures it out, you'll already be dead. And without you, his weakness, his vulnerability, his heart, he'll go back to being the cold, calculating businessman I could have worked with." Elena stepped closer. "So what's it going to be, Lena? Jump, or I shoot you and my men throw your body over anyway?" Lena's mind raced, searching for options. She could scream, but would anyone hear over the party noise below? She could run, but Elena's men would catch her before she reached the door. She could fight, but 3 against 1 when they were armed and she wasn't seemed like suicide. Then her phone buzzed in her clutch. Elena's eyes flicked to it with annoyance. "Throw it over," Elena commanded. "Now." But Lena had already seen the preview of the message on her screen. It was from Adrian, and it said simply, "Duck." Lena dropped to the ground without hesitation, and the roof exploded into chaos. Gunshots cracked through the night air, but they weren't aimed at Lena. Adrian's security team had materialized from the shadows. 3 on the adjacent building with rifles, 2 more bursting through the roof access door behind Elena. The tactical precision was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. Elena's men went down before they could even raise their weapons, neutralized with shots that were calculated not to kill, but to incapacitate. Elena herself spun toward the door, gun still in hand, but froze when she found herself facing Marcus, with his weapon trained directly at her chest. "Drop it," Marcus said, his voice flat and final. "Now." For a heartbeat, Elena looked like she might try anyway, might pull the trigger on some desperate last attempt to finish what she'd started. Then her fingers opened and the gun clattered to the rooftop concrete. "Smart choice," Marcus said. He gestured to one of his team. "Secure her." Lena was still on the ground, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, when hands gripped her shoulders. She flinched before recognizing Adrian's touch, his voice rough with something that sounded like fear. Are you hurt? He was already checking her over with clinical efficiency, looking for injuries she didn't have. Lena, answer me. Are you hurt? No, she managed. I'm fine. How did you... Later! Adrian pulled her to her feet and into his arms with crushing force, his hand cradling the back of her head like she was something precious he'd almost lost. You left the ballroom. You came up here alone. What were you thinking? She said people would die if I didn't come alone. So you believed her? Adrian pulled back enough to look at her, and his eyes were black with fury and residual fear. You believe the woman who's been trying to kill you, and you came up here without backup? I didn't have time to think it through? That's the problem. You didn't think. His hands tightened on her shoulders, not quite painful, but firm enough to make his point. You could have died, Lena. If we'd been 30 seconds later, if Marcus hadn't noticed you were gone when he did, if I hadn't already had people positioned on the adjacent buildings. But you did, Lena interrupted. You had people positioned. You were prepared for this. I'm always prepared for worst-case scenarios. That doesn't mean I want to experience them. Adrian's forehead pressed against hers, his breathing still unsteady. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever choose to walk into danger alone when you have people willing to fight beside you. I was trying to protect the people at the party, and I'm trying to protect you. Let me. He pulled her close again, and Lena felt the tension vibrating through his entire body. I can't do this if you're going to be reckless. I can't focus on taking down Victor if I'm terrified you're going to get yourself killed trying to be a hero. Then maybe we take him down together, Lena said against his chest. No more separating, no more one of us being bait while the other executes the plan. Partners, remember? That means we fight side by side. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hand moving to tangle in her hair. You're going to drive me insane. Probably, but you'll never be bored. A sound that might have been a laugh escaped his throat. Then he stepped back, his expression shifting into the cold calculation Lena was learning to recognize as his operational mode. Marcus, status on Elena's men? Neutralized, non-fatally. Both will survive for questioning. Marcus had Elena secured with zip ties, the woman's expression cycling between fury and fear. What do you want done with her? Adrian turned his attention to Elena, and the temperature on the rooftop seemed to drop 10 degrees. You tried to kill my fiancée. Again. After your father and I had an explicit conversation this morning about leaving her alone. My father is weak, Elena spat. He doesn't understand that some victories require blood. You did, once, before she made you soft. Soft, Adrian repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He crossed to Elena with predatory grace, crouching down to meet her eyes. You think I'm soft because I chose not to kill you in that warehouse? Because I let you walk away when you held a gun to Sarah's head? That wasn't softness, Elena. That was strategy. I wanted Victor to see that I could be reasonable, that we could resolve our conflicts without leaving bodies in our wake. And now? Now you've tried to murder someone I care about, twice, which means strategy is off the table. Adrian's smile was terrible, all teeth and promise of violence. You're going to call your father. You're going to tell him exactly what happened here tonight, and you're going to make it very clear that this ends now, or I dismantle everything he's built piece by piece. He won't negotiate with you. Not after you stole his shipment. I didn't steal it. I intercepted it, took the cargo, and left every single one of his people alive and unharmed, with a message that this was repayment for the 3 of mine he killed this morning. Adrian's eyes never left Elena's face. I could have slaughtered them all. I could have sent their bodies back to Victor in pieces. But I didn't, because I wanted him to understand that I'm offering him one last chance to end this before it becomes something neither of us can walk away from. You're bluffing. Am I? Adrian pulled out his phone and pulled up a photo that he showed to Elena. Lena couldn't see the screen, but she watched Elena's face go white. That's the shipping manifest from tonight's intercept. 30 million in pharmaceuticals that I've already redirected to my own distribution network. But more importantly, that's the documentation proving Victor's been smuggling controlled substances through a legitimate medical supply company, complete with signatures from the CEO, who happens to be a major political donor. Where did you get that? I've had someone inside your father's organization for 6 months. planted specifically in case I ever needed leverage. Adrian's expression was merciless. One anonymous tip to the DEA with this documentation, and Victor's legitimate businesses collapse. His political connections disappear overnight. Every alliance he's built over decades dissolves because no one wants to be associated with someone under federal investigation. Elena's defiance crumbled into something approaching panic. You wouldn't. The investigation would touch everyone, including you. I'm very good at insulating myself from investigations. Your father isn't quite as careful. Adrian stood, pocketing his phone. So here's what happens next. You call Victor. You tell him I have evidence that will destroy him. You tell him about tonight, about how you tried to kill Lena and failed because I'm always 3 steps ahead. And you tell him that he has 24 hours to agree to a ceasefire before I burn his entire empire to the ground. And if I refuse, then I give this evidence to the authorities tonight, and you can explain to your father from a federal holding cell why his kingdom fell, because you couldn't accept that I chose someone else. Marcus handed Elena a phone. She stared at it like it was a venomous snake, then at Adrian, then finally at Lena still standing near the edge of the roof with her expensive dress and diamonds, and the kind of backbone Elena clearly hadn't anticipated. You really love her, Elena said, something like understanding finally breaking through her fury. This isn't strategy anymore. You actually love her. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He crossed back to Lena, his hand finding hers with the natural ease of something they'd done 1,000 times instead of a handful of days. I really do. Which is why I'm willing to destroy your father's empire to keep her safe. Make the call, Elena. End this. Elena's hand shook as she dialed. The conversation was brief, conducted in Russian that Lena couldn't follow, but she heard Victor's voice rising even through the phone speaker, heard Elena's responses becoming increasingly desperate. When the call ended, Elena looked 10 years older. He agrees to meet, tomorrow morning, neutral ground. Elena's voice was hollow. He wants to negotiate terms. Smart man, Adrian gestured to Marcus. Take her to one of our safe locations, comfortable but secure. She's insurance until the meeting is concluded. You can't hold me hostage. I can, and I will. You tried to kill Lena, twice. The fact that you're still breathing is more mercy than you deserve. Adrian's eyes were cold. Be grateful I'm not my father. He would have thrown you off this roof himself and made it look like the suicide you were planning to stage. Marcus escorted Elena away, leaving Lena alone with Adrian on the roof under a sky full of stars that were barely visible through the city's light pollution. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that she couldn't quite control. What's funny? Adrian asked. 3 days ago, I was invisible. Nobody. A girl sitting in the corner at a wedding where I didn't belong. And now I'm standing on a rooftop after nearly being murdered, watching you threaten to destroy a criminal empire, realizing that I've somehow become the reason you're willing to burn the world down. Lena met his eyes. How did this become my life? You said yes when I asked you to dance. Adrian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. Everything after that was just momentum. Momentum, Lena repeated. That's one word for it. What would you call it? Lena considered the question seriously. Fate, maybe, or stupidity, or the best mistake either of us ever made. All of the above, Adrian agreed. He was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her hip through the silk of her dress. When Marcus told me you'd left the ballroom, when I realized Elena had gotten to you, I've never been that afraid in my entire life. You seemed pretty calm. That was training. Inside, I was terrified. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I meant what I said to Elena. I love you. I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between the performance and the reality, I fell in love with you, which is inconvenient and dangerous, and probably the stupidest thing I could have done. Why stupid? Because loving someone in my world is vulnerability. It's a weakness enemies can exploit. It's the difference between making calculated decisions and making emotional ones. Adrian's eyes searched hers. But I can't seem to stop. Can't seem to care that it's reckless. Can't seem to want anything except to keep you safe and by my side for however long you'll stay. Lena's heart felt too big for her chest. I love you too, I didn't want to. I tried not to. But you're impossible not to love once someone gets past all the walls and calculation and seen what's underneath. What's underneath? Someone who cares so deeply that he's built an empire just to protect the people and things that matter to him. Someone who's capable of incredible violence but chooses mercy when he can. Someone who saw me when I was invisible and decided I was worth making visible. Lena stretched up to kiss him, soft and certain. Someone who makes me want to be brave instead of safe. Adrian kissed her back like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning, his hands tangling in her hair, his body pressed against hers with desperate certainty. They stood like that for a long moment, two people who'd found each other in the most improbable circumstances and decided to hold on despite everything that said they shouldn't. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Come with me tomorrow, to the meeting with Victor. I know it's dangerous, and I know the smart thing would be to keep you somewhere safe, but we're partners, Lena finished, and partners face things together. Yes, I'll be there. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway, Lena smiled. That seems to be my approach to everything involving you, terrified but committed. I can work with that. Adrian's phone buzzed with a message. Marcus has Elena secured. We should get you back to the penthouse. Tomorrow is going to be intense. The meeting with Victor was set for 10 the following morning at the same restaurant where they'd had their previous conversation. This time, the atmosphere was entirely different. Victor sat alone at the table, Elena conspicuously absent, his expression carved from stone and fury barely contained. Adrian? Lena! Victor's voice was tight with suppressed rage. My daughter tells me you've acquired some interesting documentation. I have. Adrian remained standing, his hand at Lena's back. Documentation that would be very interesting to federal authorities, but I'd prefer not to use it if we can reach an understanding. An understanding? Victor's laugh was bitter. You've stolen my shipment, threatened my empire, and held my daughter hostage. What kind of understanding did you have in mind? The kind where you accept that I've chosen Lena as my partner and you redirect your ambitions elsewhere. The kind where you call off Elena and anyone else in your organization who might think targeting my fiancé is acceptable. The kind where we return to being professional colleagues who occasionally cooperate and mostly stay out of each other's way. And my shipment? Consider it payment for the 3 people you killed. We're even. Adrian pulled out his phone and set it on the table, the screen displaying the evidence he'd mentioned the night before. This documentation disappears. My inside source in your organization withdraws quietly. Elena is released unharmed, and we all pretend the past week never happened. Victor stared at the phone for a long moment. And if I refuse, then I send this to the DEA, the FBI, and every journalist who's been trying to expose your operation for years. Your legitimate businesses collapse. Your political allies distance themselves. Your reputation as someone untouchable evaporates overnight. Adrian's expression was merciless. I don't want to destroy you, Victor, but I will if you force my hand. Because of her. Victor's eyes shifted to Lena. You're willing to burn decades of professional courtesy for a woman you've known less than a week. Yes, Adrian said simply, because she's not just any woman. She's the woman I'm going to marry. The woman who'll stand beside me building something better than the empires we've both created in shadows. And I protect what's mine. Victor was silent for a long moment, calculation warring with pride across his features. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not the pleasant, fake smile Lena had seen before, but something genuine and almost respectful. You've changed, Victor said. The old Adrian would have already pulled the trigger on this threat, would have destroyed me just to demonstrate capability. But you're offering me a way out, a way to save face and maintain my operation. That's growth. Or weakness, Adrian replied. Depending on your perspective. No, it's wisdom, knowing when to fight and when to find another path. Victor stood, extending his hand. I accept your terms. The ceasefire holds. Elena will be informed that pursuing this further is forbidden, and your fiancé, he turned to Lena, will be left alone by anyone in my organization. You have my word. Adrian shook his hand, the gesture sealing an agreement that would reshape the power dynamics of the entire city. Your word is enough. For now. I notice you didn't promise not to use that evidence if I violate our agreement. I don't make promises I might need to break, Adrian replied. But if you honor this ceasefire, the documentation disappears and we never speak of it again. Fair enough. Victor buttoned his jacket. I suppose I should offer congratulations on your engagement. Though I suspect congratulations are unnecessary, you two have already determined you're keeping each other regardless of what anyone else thinks. You're right, Lena said, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the restaurant. We have. Victor studied her for a moment, then shook his head. Elena was wrong about you. You're not some naive girl who got caught up in circumstances beyond her control. You're exactly as dangerous as Adrian, just in different ways. I learned from the best, Lena replied, echoing what she'd said to Adrian days earlier. Indeed, you did. Victor moved toward the exit, then paused. A word of advice, my dear. Adrian's world is complicated and often violent, but I suspect you already knew that when you said yes to his proposal. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next, not just the external threats, but the internal ones. Power changes people. Make sure you both remember who you were before it started changing you. Then he was gone, leaving Adrian and Lena alone in the private room with the weight of what they'd just accomplished settling over them like a second skin. Is it really over? Lena asked. With Victor? Yes. He's pragmatic enough to know when to cut his losses. Adrian pulled her into his arms. With everyone else who might see you as my weakness, that's an ongoing concern we'll have to manage. Together. Together? Adrian agreed. He was quiet for a moment, his hand moving to play with the engagement ring he'd given her days ago. This thing between us, it started as strategy, but I want it to be real, all of it. Not just the feelings, but the commitment, the partnership, the building something together. Are you asking me to actually marry you? I'm asking if you'd consider turning a fake engagement into a real one, eventually, when we're both ready and not dodging assassination attempts. Adrian's smile was self-deprecating. I know it's insane. We've known each other less than a week. You've seen the absolute worst parts of my world and the violence I'm capable of. Any rational person would run. Good thing I stopped being rational the moment I said yes to dancing with you. Lena stretched up to kiss him, soft and certain. Yes, eventually. When we're ready, I'll marry you for real. You're sure? No, but I haven't been sure of anything since I met you, and that hasn't stopped me yet. Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I love you, Adrian Volkov. The real you, not the performance. The man who's capable of incredible violence but chooses mercy when he can. The man who saw something worth choosing in an invisible girl at a corner table. The man who's willing to burn empires to protect the people he loves. I love you too, Adrian said, and the words sounded like a promise. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking out into sunshine and the beginning of something neither had planned for, but both were willing to fight to keep. Marcus and the security team formed their usual protective corridor, but the threat level had dropped from critical to manageable. Victor's agreement held weight in their world, and word would spread quickly that Lena Rivera was off limits. The next few weeks passed in a strange combination of normalcy and adjustment. Adrian had been right. There were ongoing threats, people who tested the boundaries of Victor's ceasefire, rivals who thought they saw opportunity in Adrian's visible attachment to Lena. But they faced each challenge together, learning to read each other's signals, developing the kind of partnership that only came from shared danger and absolute trust. Lena moved fully into the penthouse, her few remaining possessions from her old life integrated into Adrian's space until it became their space. She discovered that loving Adrian Volkov meant accepting the complexity of his world, the late-night phone calls about shipments and territories, the security protocols that governed their daily lives, the careful dance of maintaining power while trying to build something better. But it also meant experiencing the man beneath the reputation, the Adrian who brought her coffee in bed when he woke before her, who listened with genuine interest when she talked about art or books or ideas for how his wealth could be used for something beyond maintaining power, who held her through nightmares about rooftops and guns and threats that still sometimes felt too real. 6 months after the night they'd met at that wedding, Lena stood in front of a mirror adjusting a dress that wasn't midnight blue, but wedding white. Sarah stood beside her, fully recovered from her brief kidnapping and cautiously accepting of Lena's new life, though she still occasionally muttered about her best friend having terrible taste in men. "You're really doing this," Sarah said, not quite a question. "I really am." Lena turned to face her friend. "I know you think I'm insane. I think you're the bravest person I know, or the most reckless, possibly both." Sarah's expression softened. "But I've also seen the way he looks at you, the way you look at him, and I've never seen you this happy, even when things are complicated and dangerous." "They're always going to be complicated and dangerous," Lena admitted. "That's part of loving someone like Adrian, but it's also real and honest and more meaningful than any safe, simple relationship could ever be." "Then I'm happy for you, both of you." Sarah helped adjust Lena's veil. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "That you'll never become so comfortable with the danger that you forget it's not normal. That you'll hold on to the part of yourself that knows this world is insane, even as you learn to navigate it." "I promise." Lena squeezed her friend's hand. "Thank you for not running away when things got crazy, for still being here, even though my life became something you never signed up for. That's what friends do. We stay, even when it's terrifying." Sarah smiled. "Now come on. You have a dangerous crime boss waiting to marry you in what I'm told is the social event of the season." The ceremony was held in the same ballroom where they'd first danced, transformed now into something between dream and reality, with flowers and candlelight, and carefully curated guest lists that represented both Adrian's world and the legitimate society connections they were building. Senator Ashford was there, along with half the city's power players, all of them bearing witness to the union of Adrian Volkov and the woman who'd somehow captured his heart. But Lena barely noticed the guests. Her attention was fixed on Adrian waiting at the altar in a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of some dangerous fairy tale, his eyes tracking her movement with an intensity that made breathing difficult in the best way. When she reached him, he took her hand with the same certainty he'd shown that first night, but now there was nothing calculated about the gesture. This was real. The promises they were about to make, the life they'd chosen to build together, the partnership forged in danger and refined through trust. "You look devastating," Adrian murmured as the officiant began the ceremony. "You told me that at the museum gala," Lena whispered back. "I meant it then. I mean it more now." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Last chance to run. There are probably 6 different exit routes I could get you to before anyone noticed. I'm not running. I stopped running the night I said yes to dancing with you." "Then I suppose we're doing this." "We definitely are." The ceremony itself was a blur of vows and rings, and the weight of hundreds of eyes watching them make promises that transcended strategy. When the officiant finally pronounced them married and Adrian pulled her into a kiss that was both chaste enough for public consumption and heated enough to promise more later, Lena felt something settle in her chest that felt like coming home. The reception was everything Adrian had promised: champagne flowing freely, orchestra music filling the ballroom, conversations happening in corners that would shape the city's future. But Lena found herself caring less about the strategic implications and more about the man who kept pulling her onto the dance floor, who introduced her to contacts not as his asset, but as his wife and partner, who looked at her like she was the only person in the room worth his attention. Near midnight, they escaped to one of the balconies overlooking the city. The same city where Lena had been invisible just months ago, where she'd existed on the edges of other people's lives, where she'd never imagined mattering to anyone, let alone to someone like Adrian Volkov. "Regrets?" Adrian asked, his arms wrapped around her waist from behind. "Several thousand, none of them about you." Lena leaned back against his chest. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For choosing me when you could have had anyone. For loving me despite all the logical reasons you shouldn't." Lena turned in his arms to face him. "For giving me a life I never imagined I could have." "I should be thanking you," Adrian replied. "You took a cold, calculating businessman and reminded him what it felt like to care about something beyond power and control. You made me better, Lena. Softer in the ways that matter, harder in the ways that protect what we're building." "What are we building?" Lena asked. "Beyond just surviving in your world, Beyond maintaining power, what comes next? Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hand coming up to cradle her face. I've been thinking about that. My empire was built in shadows, maintained through fear and capability, and being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But that's not sustainable forever. Eventually, I want to build something legitimate, something that uses all this wealth and influence for more than just maintaining territory.
Like what? Foundations that help people who fell through society's cracks the way you almost did. Investments in industries that create actual value instead of just moving money around. Using my connections to change policies instead of just exploiting them. His eyes searched hers. I want to build something we can both be proud of. Something that doesn't require our children to inherit a criminal empire. Children? Lena repeated softly. You've thought that far ahead? I've thought about everything. About growing old with you, about building legitimate businesses alongside the illegitimate ones until we can phase out the latter, about creating a legacy that's more than just power and fear. Adrian's smile was self-deprecating. Probably getting ahead of myself. We've been married for approximately 4 hours. No. I love that you're thinking about the future, our future. Lena stretched up to kiss him. Let's build it together. The foundations, the legitimate businesses, the legacy we can be proud of. Let's take everything we learned surviving in the shadows and use it to create something better. Starting when? Starting tomorrow. Tonight, we're just 2 people who fell in love in the most improbable way possible, celebrating the fact that we chose each other despite every logical reason we shouldn't have. Lena's hand found his over her heart. Tomorrow, we start changing the world. Tonight, we just exist in this moment. Adrian pulled her close, and they stood like that on the balcony overlooking the city that had brought them together, 2 people who'd started as strategy and become something infinitely more complicated and real. Below them, the reception continued, their guests unaware that the couple they'd come to celebrate was already planning to reshape the entire landscape of power and influence in ways none of them could anticipate. 6 months later, Lena stood in a different ballroom at a different event, this one celebrating the launch of the Volkov Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping young people who'd fallen through society's cracks, former foster youth, kids aging out of the system, anyone who'd been invisible and overlooked the way Lena once had. The foundation had Adrian's money behind it and Lena's vision guiding it, and together they were creating pathways for people society had written off. Sarah was there, having taken a position as the foundation's director of outreach. Her initial skepticism about Adrian transformed into grudging respect as she watched him funnel millions into programs that actually helped people. Viktor Petrov had even made a donation, his pragmatism recognizing that supporting the Volkovs' legitimate ventures was good business and better politics. You've come a long way from that corner table, Sarah said, watching Lena work the room with the same confidence she'd once had to fake. Look at you now, powerful, respected, changing lives. We've come a long way, Lena corrected. None of this happens without you believing in it, without you taking a chance on working with us despite everything that happened. Yeah, well, someone has to keep you grounded. Make sure you don't forget what it felt like to be invisible. Sarah's expression softened. Though I don't think you could forget if you tried. That's why this foundation works. Because you remember. Lena did remember. She remembered being overlooked and dismissed and sitting in corners at events where she didn't belong. She remembered the moment Adrian had crossed that ballroom and seen something worth choosing in her defiance and fear. She remembered saying yes to a dance that became a fake engagement, that became real love, that became a partnership built on trust and shared danger and absolute certainty. Adrian found her an hour later, pulling her away from a conversation with a potential donor to steal a moment alone in a gallery adjoining the ballroom. Escaping your own event? Lena teased. Stealing time with my wife, Adrian corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Absolutely. One is avoidance, the other is priority management. His hand settled at her waist with familiar ease. How are you feeling? Good. Tired. Overwhelmed by how many people showed up and how much money we raised. Lena leaned into his touch. Grateful that we get to do this. Use everything we have to help people who need it. It was your vision. I just provided the capital and connections. It was our vision, built together like everything else. Lena's hand moved to rest over her still flat stomach, over the secret they'd discovered just days earlier.
And soon we'll be building something else together. Adrian's eyes widened with understanding, his hand covering hers with a gentleness that still surprised her after months of marriage. You're sure? The doctor confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait until tonight to tell you, until we'd celebrated this thing we built. Lena smiled. Surprise. You're going to be a father. For a moment, Adrian just stared at her with an expression Lena couldn't quite read. Then he pulled her into his arms with crushing force, his face buried in her neck, his breath unsteady against her skin. I love you, he said, the words muffled but fierce. I love you so much it terrifies me. And now we're bringing someone else into this complicated, dangerous, beautiful life we've built. Are you afraid? Lena asked. Terrified, but also, Adrian pulled back to meet her eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Also more certain than ever that we're building something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something that matters beyond power and influence and all the things I used to think defined success. What defines it now? This, you, the family we're creating, the foundation that's changing lives, the legitimate businesses we're building alongside phasing out the criminal ones. Adrian's hand moved to cup her face, a legacy built on more than fear and capability, built on love and partnership and choosing to be better than we were. Lena kissed him then, soft and certain, in a gallery adjacent to a ballroom full of people celebrating the foundation they'd created together. Outside, the city sprawled beneath them, the same city where they'd met, where danger and strategy had brought them together, where performance had become truth and fake had become real. They'd started as a lie, a calculated move at a wedding, a dangerous man, and an invisible girl playing roles that were supposed to be temporary. But somewhere between the performance and the reality, between the threats and the tenderness, they'd become something neither had planned for and neither could imagine living without. Ready to go back out there? Adrian asked eventually. We still have donors to thank and speeches to give. Ready, Lena said. Let's go show them what we've built. They walked back into the ballroom hand in hand, two people who transformed from strategic partners into actual partners, from fake engagement into real marriage, from surviving in shadows into building something that brought light. The guests welcomed them back with applause, unaware of the new secret they carried, unaware of how far they'd both come from that night at a wedding when Adrian Volkov had crossed a ballroom to ask an invisible girl to dance. But Lena knew. She knew every step of the journey, every choice that had brought them here, every moment of danger and trust and falling in love despite every logical reason not to. And standing beside Adrian with his hand warm in hers and their future growing inside her and the foundation they'd built together celebrating its launch, Lena Rivera Volkov understood something fundamental about the life she'd chosen. She wasn't invisible anymore. She'd never be invisible again. And the dangerous, complicated, absolutely real love she shared with Adrian Volkov was worth every risk she'd taken to get here. What had started as pretend